Arden. Do you want to study at the Silver Lounge? Elias asked as we met outside the building for my last class. We had agreed to start preparing for the upcoming competition, and despite my insistence that we simply meet at the gates, Elias had come all the way here. Without a moment's hesitation, I shook my head. No. His brows knitted together in confusion. Why not? I pressed my lips together. The truth was, I wasn't in the mood to run into Sienna, though I couldn't deny that the lingering sting from the slap I had given her still sent a satisfying tingle through my palm. With a smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth, Elias raised an eyebrow. Do you want to come to my place instead? I turned to him, my expression deadpan. No way. He raised his hands in mock surrender, clearly amused. Just asking. A small smile crept onto my lips as I responded, I know a place. He looked at me with a hint of suspicion. Where are we going? You'll see, I said, clicking my tongue playfully as I tugged at his sleeve, dragging him along with me. We wove through the campus, and after a bit of wandering, we finally reached the destination. As I pushed the door open, the bell chimed gently, announcing our arrival. Welcome, a familiar voice called out. Alara, buried beneath a pile of old tomes and scrolls, peeked out from behind the reception desk. Her hair was piled up in a messy bun, and she wore comically large magnifying glasses perched on her nose, making her eyes appear 5 times their usual size. A smile spread across her face as soon as she recognized me. Arden. Alara, I greeted warmly, making my way over to her. What brings you here today? She asked with genuine curiosity. Do you have seats available? I replied, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. Alara nodded eagerly. Of course, at the back. Just follow the left corridor. Are you planning to study? Her eyes briefly flicked over to Elias, who had wandered off to a tall shelf, running his fingers along the leather bindings of the books. Yeah, thanks, I said. No problem. She flashed me a bright smile and waved her hand in farewell, already turning back to her pile of books. Sorry I can't keep you company. We just received a shipment of antique books, and they're a dusty mess. No worries, I assured her again, leading Elias toward the cozy study area tucked away at the back of the library. Once we settled in, the atmosphere was blissfully quiet. I gathered the textbooks I had brought along. The prelims were just around the corner, and the competition would follow closely behind. This was the calm before the storm, and I needed to make the most out of it. For a few moments, all was peaceful. Elias remained silent, opening his notebook and beginning to scribble furiously. I found myself diving into my reading, flipping through my notes and outlining key points. My mind began to settle, gradually taking on the necessary focus. However, just as I was achieving that focused state of concentration, my phone buzzed. Once, twice, thrice. I sighed and finally checked my messages. But just then, my phone buzzed again. It was Cade. What is his problem? I muttered under my breath, shaking my head. His text didn't seem important. He was still teasing me about being jealous from a while ago. I bit the inside of my cheek, trying not to smile. It was ridiculous, yet he was being weirdly sweet. Then another message popped up. This time, it was from Jaxon. I clicked my tongue, annoyance bubbling up inside me. How did he even get this number? I stared at the screen for a moment before blocking him without a second thought. I definitely didn't want that headache. Elias, sitting across from me, suddenly let out a deep breath, loud enough to make me look up. If you weren't going to study, he muttered, then you shouldn't have agreed to come with me. What? He turned his head slightly, avoiding my gaze. You're just distracted the entire time. I am studying, I said defensively, though I felt the heat rising in my cheeks. He glanced pointedly at the untouched book in front of me. Really? I pressed my lips into a tight line. Okay, maybe he had a point. I thought we were supposed to actually prepare for the competition. Instead, you've been texting, sighing, and smiling every 5 seconds. Elias had his arms crossed, his pen tapping lightly against the edge of the table. His lips were pulled down into a quiet frown, and although he tried to mask it with indifference, there was something undeniably childish about the way his brows furrowed. He looked sulky. I couldn't help it. A small chuckle escaped me as I tilted my head toward him. Are you sulking? No, he muttered. I'm just saying, we came here to study, but you're not even paying attention to me. I raised an eyebrow. To you? Yeah, he replied, his voice a little defensive. "I'm your partner, aren't I?" Another laugh slipped from my lips before I could stop it. "You look like a kid deprived of his wants." It was meant to be a light-hearted comment. However, the moment the words left my mouth, I regretted it. Elias fell silent. His jaw clenched, and his gaze dropped back to his notes. "Oh no, did I say something wrong?" "I didn't mean it like that," I said quickly. Elias still hadn't spoken. My parents don't love me either," I blurted, hoping it might lighten the mood. He turned toward me slowly, one brow raised. A small chuckle escaped his lips. "You're really admitting that out loud?" he asked, still amused. I scratched the back of my neck, suddenly feeling self-conscious. "Well, you seemed offended." "I'm not," he said, shaking his head. "I'm far too old to be offended." "We're not too old to long for a parent's love," I responded, my tone turning more serious. "But sometimes it cages us. It's not easy, but sometimes it's better without it. That doesn't mean we can't still want it, though." His gaze wavered for just a second, a flicker of understanding crossing his face. Although the atmosphere had brightened a little, it gained an awkward edge after my admission. Determined to break the tension, I reached forward and grabbed one of the review materials he'd brought, hoping it might shift the focus back to studying. As I opened it and began scanning the pages, my eyes widened in disbelief. There were diagrams, annotations, summaries, and timelines of past pack wars I hadn't even remembered. Every section was meticulously color-coded, complete with strategic commentary in the margins. Whoa. I breathed, flipping to another page. "When did you even have the time to write this?" Elias simply shrugged. "It's nothing." "It's not, though," I said, still flipping through the pages. "Your war strategies, no wonder people say what they say. Even the other factions adapted some of these, didn't they?" He remained silent, a thoughtful look crossing his face. "You're a really good strategist," I continued, my eyes still glued to the detailed notes. Still, he didn't respond. "The pack is lucky to have you," I added, glancing up at him. Elias smirked faintly, finally turning his head away, trying to hide his expression. He crossed his arms tighter against his chest. "You don't know what you're saying. Why wouldn't I?" I countered, my tone earnest. "These are impressive." He finally turned to me, his expression challenging. "You think I need someone by my side to praise me or something?" I smiled softly. "I think most people say they don't, but truly, no man is an island." I leaned back, keeping my gaze locked on him, curious to see his reaction. "We all crave connection, Elias. Even the most brilliant minds need someone who sees them for who they are. Someone to say, 'You did well.' Someone who chooses you when you don't ask to be chosen." His eyes stayed fixed on mine, absorbing my words. After a long pause, a stillness enveloped us until the corner of Elias's mouth twitched, just barely, but it was there. And then he spoke. "I think I already found that person." Silence settled between us for a moment before I smiled up at him, a warm feeling blooming in my chest. "That's good, then," I said, my voice gentle. "Hold on to that person. You are lucky to have them." Tessa. The white ceiling of the clinic wasn't much help to my racing thoughts. It was too plain, leaving my mind at the mercy of the unwanted memories I wanted to forget. Somewhere in the background, the soft tapping of the nurse's footsteps echoed as she moved between the beds, her shoes clicking against the sterile tiles. I knew it should have felt comforting to have someone nearby, yet all I craved in that moment was silence. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the noise of my mind to quiet. Why was I still feeling this way? I came to Elite fully aware that there was no chance left for me. That door had closed long before I ever considered applying. I had made my peace with it, or so I thought. And yet here I was, lying on a damn clinic bed, my chest tightening because the man I liked wouldn't even bother to glance my way. It wasn't Arden's fault. I knew that deep down. She hadn't done anything wrong. In fact, she had done everything right. She was the kind of person who didn't even realize the way people looked at her, the way he looked at her. I swallowed hard, feeling my throat tighten. She didn't ask for his attention, and he didn't belong to me. So why did it still feel like an act of betrayal? The nurse's footsteps gradually faded away, and I assumed she had gone to fetch something from the supply room. I thought that perhaps the ensuing peace and quiet would offer some comfort, but it didn't. At this point, I had a feeling that nothing would make me feel okay except for the passage of time. Even that remained uncertain. Just then, the door creaked open. I didn't need to look to know it wasn't the nurse returning. There was a soft rustle of movement followed by giggles, and then, unmistakably, the sound of kissing filled the room. I cracked one eye open, staring at the pale blue curtain drawn between my bed and the next. Seriously? They were actually doing this here? In the clinic? I frowned, turning my face away in annoyance, hoping they'd get it over with quickly and leave me to my thoughts. But then, a familiar scent drifted through the air, wrapping around me like a memory I wished to avoid. My stomach turned. No, I hesitated, wrestling with my better judgment, but curiosity ultimately got the best of me. I peeked through the small gap in the curtain and instantly regretted it. Rowan was there. His hands rested on the girl's waist, their mouths locked together as she submitted to him. I thought his eyes were closed, but they snapped open and landed right on me. Our gazes locked. My eyes widened and a small gasp escaped my lips, yet even then, he didn't pull away from her. Instead, he kept going, like he was daring me to look away. But I knew I couldn't. It was like trying to avert my gaze from a car crash I knew was coming. My breath caught in my throat, my fingers curling into the sheets beside me. Heat surged up my neck, leaving me utterly humiliated. He finally pulled back slightly. His hand remained on the girl's waist, but the expression on his face had darkened. The girl turned, annoyance radiating from her. Her eyes landed right on me. "What the hell are you looking at?" I turned away sharply, my heart hammering as shame crawled under my skin. I stared at the wall, attempting to convince myself that the ache in my chest was merely residual from a headache. "No, both just go." "What?" the girl replied, incredulous. "Rowan, let's just keep going." "Go," he repeated, his voice firmer this time. I could hear her continuous complaints followed by the sound of footsteps and the door closing. Silence engulfed the room, stretching out for what felt like an eternity. I didn't dare look at him. I kept my eyes fixed on the folds of the curtain beside me, my skin still burned from what I had witnessed earlier. Finally, after what felt like an hour, but might have been only a minute, Rowan broke the silence. "You should have found another partner," he muttered, referring to Miss Loveson's semester project. I bit my lip as he continued. "I won't be able to do it with you." "I know," I replied, my voice meek, "but we don't have a choice." "I already asked her to switch me," he said. She didn't agree. My eyes finally shifted to him. He stood by the other bed, hands shoved deep in his pockets, my hair messily tousled. He looked every bit as tired as I felt. "Try telling her yourself," he added, not even bothering to look at me. I swallowed hard, allowing the silence to linger once more. "What if I don't want to do that?" His eyes turned to me sharply, brows furrowing in frustration. "You're seriously being difficult again?" Difficult. I couldn't muster a response. I turned my head to the side, staring at the wall again, battling the heat prickling behind my eyes. I despised how he could still get under my skin with a single word. He sighed heavily. "Why did you even come to this school?" he asked pointedly. "You were set to go to another one. I heard from your mom." It took me a moment to gather my thoughts. How could I respond when I knew the truth? That I came here because of him. Because a foolish part of me believed there was still something to salvage between us. That maybe, if I was here, he'd remember what we once had. Yet now, all I felt was irrevocable regret, coupled with the persistent longing that still resided in my heart. I cleared my throat, determined to steer the conversation away. "Do you like Arden?" That question made him pause. He turned slowly, brows raised in surprise. "What does that have to do with you?" I felt the words cut deep. "She's my friend," I maintained, striving to keep my voice steady. "If you're serious about her, then kissing someone else in the school clinic isn't a good look." Rowan clicked his tongue and looked away, contemplating his response. "Arden is—" He ran a hand through his hair, searching for the right words. "She's different." The words hit me harder than I anticipated. I bit the inside of my cheek, tasting iron. "I got it," I said, perhaps a bit too quickly. I turned my body toward the wall, desperately hoping he wouldn't notice the slight tremble in my hands. Rowan fell silent for a moment. Then his voice returned, colder now. "We don't have to see each other much for the project," he stated matter-of-factly. "We know each other well enough anyway. We can figure it out with minimal contact." His words insinuated that I was merely an obligation he had to tolerate. I nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see me. Sure. He didn't bother to say goodbye when he left. I heard his footsteps retreating, and then the door clicked shut behind him. Only then did I allow myself to blink rapidly, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. He was right. We knew each other. And perhaps that was the saddest part of all, Arden. The prelims were finally over. After days filled with tears, sweat, and fervent prayers, it was done. Because the school claimed to want to take care of our mental health and overall well-being, they were sending us on a 2-day, 1-night vacation, sponsored by Mr. Winters himself. Mr. Winters decided to send us freshmen to a serene nature retreat while the seniors enjoyed a beach getaway, all while the teachers prepped the grades and finalized the semester results. We were told this was a well-earned break. It was a nice gesture, that is, if you could overlook the fact that this was the first time he had ever done anything like it. That alone was enough to make my wolf perk up, ears mentally pinned back in suspicion. Why now? Why this sudden wave of generosity? It didn't feel like a reward. It felt more like a distraction. I still remembered the footage, the constant presence of his piercing eyes. Where is he taking those videos? What's he doing with them? My gaze shifted toward the front of the bus, hoping to find some answers. But all I saw was Tessa beside me, legs crossed, engrossed in her phone. "Did you hear?" she asked, breaking the silence. I turned my head to her. Sienna's back with the West. I sat up straighter, incredulity coursing through me. "What?" Tessa nodded, her expression serious. "Apparently she was readmitted yesterday. It looks like Mr. Winters pulled some strings for her. Jaxon must have accepted her back after all." That didn't surprise me in the slightest. Sienna's parents are quite influential back in our pack. They might have put in a good word. She shook her head. "That girl always has a way of landing on her feet, doesn't she?" We pulled into the campsite 30 minutes later, and my attention was stolen by the breathtaking sight ahead. "Wow," Tessa muttered, her eyes wide with wonder. Yeah, that was putting it mildly. Wooden cabins nestled in a perfect ring around a massive fire pit. Fairy lights adorned the trees above, and a small river meandered along the clearing's edge like something right out of a postcard. The scent of moss, pine, and running water hit my nose, instantly calming my restless wolf. It was beautiful. If there was one thing Mr. Winters did right, it was choosing this magnificent location. Sir Thompson and Miss Loveson stood at the center, clipboards in hand, waving cheerfully as the students poured off the bus and from their private cars. "Everyone, grab your bags and check the boards for room assignments." I stepped off the bus and took a deep breath, already feeling lighter compared to when I was in Elite. This place was truly made for creatures like us. I followed the others toward the rooming chart nailed to a thick pine trunk. I scanned down the list for my name and the room assignment. 4B, I muttered to myself. Tessa exclaimed excitedly, 4B? I'm also in that room. I smiled brightly, thrilled with the news. This was already turning out better than I had imagined. We grabbed our bags and made our way to the designated room. However, the moment I opened the door, my fleeting happiness was about to be shattered. Sitting on the bed by the window, brushing her perfectly styled hair, was none other than Sienna. Tessa froze beside me. "I'd rather room with a wild bear," she muttered. "Bears are easier to reason with," I whispered back, stifling a laugh. Sienna narrowed her eyes at us, a smug expression spreading across her face. "I can hear you, you know. There are 2 of us, and only 1 of her," Tessa whispered in a much smaller voice, making sure Sienna wouldn't catch her words despite her heightened senses. "Maybe we should just knock her out and drag her to another room." I held back a chuckle, choosing my words carefully. "Let's just ignore her," I said loudly, turning to the other bed. However, her belongings were strewn across it. Of course. After all the humiliation, Sienna remained the worst. Even with just the 3 of us in the room, her presence somehow managed to take up more space than it should have. Her overpowering perfume filled the air, as if she had bathed in it. Was she not a werewolf? Didn't she have the ability to smell herself? I stepped forward without saying a word, grabbed her things, and flung them off the bed. Her designer tote tipped over, causing makeup and brushes to spill out onto the floor in a delightful little avalanche. "Hey!" she gasped, her voice rising in an indignant screech. But I was already grabbing Tessa by the wrist and tugging her toward the door. "Come on," I muttered, eager to escape the mounting tension. We were giggling before we even stepped out of the cabin. By the time we finally reached the lake, the sun had climbed high in the sky, casting a warm glow over everything. Once again, the stunning view provided a comforting balm after all the irritation Sienna had caused. Dozens of students were already there, their voices clattering together in laughter. Some had stripped down to their swimsuits, while others lounged on blankets or walked barefoot along the rocky shore. "You can swim if you want," I suggested. Tessa shook her head and settled down beside me on the rocky slope. "I don't want to get wet. I just want to sit with you." For a while, we fell into a comfortable silence, allowing the comforting sounds of the lake to wash over us. "Are you all right now?" I finally asked, breaking the stillness. She still seemed a bit down from time to time, and I wanted to check in on her. Tessa smiled softly, the brief shadow lifting from her features. "Yeah. I just had a headache that day, probably from all the reviewing for finals. Now that it's done, I can finally relax." I nodded and gave her a gentle pat on the back, wanting to reassure her. "It would have been nice if Owen could have come with us," I said. "Yeah," she muttered, closing her eyes and savoring the calming sounds of the water. However, our tranquility was short-lived. A series of squeals erupted from the other end of the lake, and I glanced over to see a small crowd beginning to gather. I already knew what that commotion signified before I even spotted them. The true alphas had arrived. As expected, they didn't come quietly. Their mere presence commanded attention like no other. Tessa nudged my shoulder, a playful grin on her face. "They're all looking at you." I rolled my eyes, trying to dismiss her. "Don't be ridiculous." But I made the mistake of looking. Sadly, Tessa wasn't wrong. Jaxon was the first to step forward, pulling his shirt over his head and letting it drop to the grass. His chest was broad, and every muscle in his body appeared sculpted. Each of his movements screamed alpha display, and he didn't even bother hiding the way his gaze settled on me. Before I could collect my thoughts, Rowan was already shrugging off his shirt. "Let's make it fun," he called out to the others, flashing me a grin that was far too pleased with itself. Then, without a moment's hesitation, he sprinted forward and dove into the lake, sending up a massive splash in his wake. "Seriously?" I muttered under my breath, shaking my head. Elias rolled his eyes but soon followed suit. He was leaner than the others, yet every inch of him was toned and defined. He waded into the water calmly before diving in, gliding gracefully beneath the surface. Of course, Cade was the last one to join in. For a moment, I thought he might sit this one out, avoiding whatever display this was. But then he slowly removed his shirt too. Not in a hurry like the others. Instead, he tugged it off deliberately, seemingly indifferent to the attention his body was drawing, which of course only made the crowd squeal even louder in reaction. "Damn," Tessa even muttered right next to me, her tone barely concealing her awe. I'd seen his body multiple times before. I had even touched it. Yet somehow it still made heat creep up my neck. Just his back alone could make a girl faint, broad and lined with scars that told stories none of us knew. He turned his head in my direction briefly, and I quickly looked away, pretending there was something incredibly interesting in the trees. The four of them hit the water at different times, but it was clear by how the students lined the shore that they were racing against one another. Half the girls were cheering as if they were watching a championship, and I had to admit, it was oddly surreal. The true alphas of Fenra were engaging in something so unnecessary. Rowan reached the buoy first, with Cade hot on his heels. "You had a head start," Cade muttered playfully, but Rowan merely laughed and splashed water in his direction. Elias came in a close third, but he didn't seem too bothered by the loss. Surprisingly, Jaxon, despite going into the water first, came in last, cursing as he swam back to the shore. "What the heck is happening right now?" I whispered to Tessa. "This feels like a mating display," she replied casually, biting her lip and casting her gaze back toward the lake. "It's like a full-on show of strength, all for you." I shook my head vehemently. "I want no part in it." Tessa offered a teasing smile. Thanks, though. Because of you, I'm enjoying this view. That remark sent both of us into a fit of giggles. Sienna. Why? Why is it always her? I stood just behind the trees, far enough away that they wouldn't spot me, but close enough that I couldn't look away. Arden sat by the lake, her hair catching the breeze in a way that made her look ethereal. The alphas weren't near her, but every single one of them kept glancing her way. It just wasn't fair. She doesn't even try. She doesn't flirt. She doesn't bat her lashes or wear anything that reveals her body. My fists clenched at my sides, my nails biting into my skin. I wanted to scream, to rip away that attention from her. I had been trying so hard. I've always put in the effort, and yet it's never enough. She had dodged all of the bullets thus far, but it's time to end this. Once and for all. Arden. Mr. Thompson stood beside Miss Loveson, appearing tired yet excited at the same time. I honestly couldn't blame them. Aside from checking papers in the middle of nowhere, where phone signal was difficult to retrieve, they had to act like camp counselors for a group of partially matured adults. You came here to let your wolves breathe, Mr. Thompson started, so let's give them what they want. A battle, Miss Loveson echoed, her voice sounding cheery. It's going to be faction-based, Mr. Thompson continued. We will have 3 rounds. 1 wolf from each faction will come up here, and the true alphas will fight last. I surveyed the crowd and noticed the excited glimmers in their eyes. Tessa smirked, nudging my shoulder. I guess we can fight without repercussions this time, she muttered. We'll give each competitor a score, 4 points for first place, 3 points for second, and so forth. We will tally these points at the very end, and the faction with the most points wins. Every member of the winning faction will receive 100 points each. That statement definitely got everyone's attention. Students began scrambling to discuss strategy. The prelims had been brutal, to say the least. Any chance to gain an edge, even a small one, was worth clawing over. You will shift, Mr. Thompson declared, but this is not a bloodbath. You win by pushing your opponent out of the border. He gestured toward the stone ring. Understood? A few nodded, and excited hollering followed. From the east, a girl named Juliet stepped forward, already cracking her knuckles. Her glare swept straight to the south, locking eyes with a tall girl with honey-blonde hair and a vicious grin. I heard they've got beef, Tessa murmured beside me. It's expected that the 2 of them will come out. I hope that's all they've got, I muttered. From the west, Sienna stepped forward. She walked deliberately, as if she wanted everyone to watch her. However, her eyes were focused on just one person. Do you even need to guess? Yup, she was looking straight at me. Guess you've got beef too, Tessa said by my side. I didn't even bother to respond. I already knew. The North hesitated. Mara, one of Cade's friend's girlfriends, took a step forward, but then she hesitated as she looked at the other 3 and ultimately stopped. In that moment of hesitation, I made my decision and stood up. I'll go, I declared, surprising those within the faction. Cade frowned while Tessa looked at me with wide eyes. Wait, are you sure? Before I could answer, Cade was suddenly standing beside me. His hand brushed my arm, firm and warm. Arden, I'm sure, I replied quickly, locking eyes with him. Mr. Thompson and Miss Loveson are here. It wouldn't be brutal. Cade didn't move, a small amused smirk playing on his lips. Then don't hold back. I wasn't planning to. I stepped into the arena. The moment my feet crossed the stone boundary, something clicked into place inside me. My wolf, usually quiet and contained, surged just beneath my skin. Juliet and the South girl were already baring their teeth, growling low in their throats. Sienna smirked and finally tore her gaze away from me long enough to size them up. Miss Loveson's voice rang out, loud and playful. Shift when you're ready. The other 3 didn't hesitate. Juliet's body cracked and warped, bones lengthening, fur bursting through her skin as her hands became claws and her mouth morphed into a snarl. A sleek, dusty brown wolf stood where she once did. The South girl, her name was Naira, I think, shifted into a long-legged golden wolf, built for speed and agility. Sienna was next. Her transformation was fluid and fast. Chocolate brown fur covered her body like wildfire, her eyes still unnervingly human. I took a deep breath and let the fire rise within me. The shift came quicker this time. My skin gave way to light fur, almost white, thick and silken, as my bones snapped cleanly into their new form. I landed on all fours, the dirt cold beneath my paws, my breath visible in short, steady puffs. Juliet lunged at Naira first. Naira dodged, but not fast enough. Juliet clipped her side, and the two wolves crashed into each other with a resounding thud. They rolled across the arena in a blur of fur and snapping teeth. Meanwhile, Sienna circled me slowly, her tail held high, eyes filled with malice. I mirrored her movements, keeping my steps light and controlled. My claws sank slightly into the dirt, poised to dig in. I wouldn't let her catch me off guard. A sudden yelp snapped our attention sideways. Juliet had gotten Naira by the scruff and shoved her into the outer stones, but not without cost. Naira twisted mid-fall, dragging Juliet along with her. They both tumbled outside the boundary. "Double elimination!" Mr. Thompson called out. "Ah!" those from their factions exclaimed in disappointment. As soon as they exited the ring, Sienna turned to me fully, her growl rumbling low in her chest. She seemed ready to attack at any moment. It didn't take long before her wolf charged first. She barreled toward me, claws digging into the earth. I met her head on, planting my paws firmly, bracing for impact. Our bodies clashed, fur flying as we snapped at each other, our teeth just barely grazing skin. Her aggression was untamed, feral. She lunged again, catching the side of my shoulder with her powerful jaw. A sharp pain flared down my side. Blood. I growled low in my throat. The crowd reacted with a collective noise of surprise, their murmurs rising. Was that allowed? It definitely wasn't, but I sure as hell wasn't going to back down. I kept my eyes locked on her, matching her pace. My white fur bristled, the single black streak down my spine standing tall. She was bigger, but I was faster. Sienna came at me again, fangs bared, trying to sink her teeth into my other side. I ducked and rolled. She missed. Again, she growled, this time louder. She circled too fast, stumbling slightly as her breathing turned labored, and I could see the frustration building inside her. Good, my wolf craved a fight. It yearned to end this, but I forced myself to breathe, to slow down. If I let my instincts get the better of me, I would end up just like Sienna. There had never been a moment when I had beaten Sienna in strength. However, at this very moment, I felt like I finally could. I couldn't explain it. There was something deeper I felt within myself. Past the blood, past the fear. There it was. A spark. It hit me like a sudden jolt of electricity racing down my spine. Clarity. I moved, faster than I ever thought I could. In one heartbeat, I was crouched low, and in the next, I leapt. My body collided forcefully with hers mid-lunge, knocking her completely off balance. She snarled and tried to twist away, but I landed cleanly on top of her, my front paws pinning her shoulders firmly to the ground. A thud echoed through the forest floor. She writhed. I didn't move. She clawed at the dirt. I held her down. The crowd gasped as they witnessed the scene unfold before them. Sienna's legs kicked wildly, but my weight, my grip, my rage kept her caged beneath me. She looked up at me, eyes wild and frantic, and I saw it for the first time. Fear. Because I wasn't the same girl she used to dominate anymore. I had won, and she knew it. She tried to twist again. I pressed harder. A whimper escaped her throat. "Enough!" Mr. Thompson's voice rang out. I peeled off her instantly, leaping back to my side of the ring. My chest heaved, but I didn't feel tired. I felt powerful. "Shift back!" Miss Loveson called out, tossing robes behind the trees. I turned and patted away, my tail raised high, pride swelling with every step. Behind the tall pines, I shifted quickly and pulled on the thick black robe. My shoulder throbbed where Sienna had bitten me, but it didn't hurt as much as I had anticipated. When I stepped back into the clearing, Sienna was already there. Her hair was a mess, her lips trembling. The robe hung loosely over her shoulders, and her fists were clenched tightly at her sides. "She didn't even push me out," she snapped. "Excuse me?" Mr. Thompson arched an eyebrow. Sienna looked around, expecting support. However, her peers were silent. She just pinned me," she barked. "That doesn't count." Miss Loveson laughed lightly, flipping her clipboard. "Miss Graves, you broke the rule by biting Arden, but we allowed you to continue. It was clear that you were quickly flattened. We don't have all day for this particular battle." Sienna turned to the crowd. "I was about to get up. You all saw that." "No," Mr. Thompson stated firmly. "If we hadn't stopped the battle, you'd still be on the ground." "You're just—" Sienna began, but he raised a hand to silence her. "Miss Graves," he replied, his eyes narrowing. take your loss with some dignity. Miss Stone dominated you in this game. Arden, Sienna had left after our battle, appearing utterly humiliated. I felt on top of the world, knowing that she was finally getting what she deserved. Tessa nudged me gently. "You did good," she whispered. "Thanks," I whispered back before refocusing my attention on the battle area. The second match concluded with the East's triumph, closely followed by the South. The North representative stumbled on his own paws, resulting in a mere single-point surplus. This meant it all came down to the last battle. Whichever team wins here will claim victory. There was a noticeable increase in excitement in the air. The sky above us wasn't as intense anymore, but it still felt hotter than usual, wrapping us in a thick layer of anticipation. "All 4 true alphas," Sir Thompson declared, stepping into the center of the stone square, "will now engage in a non-lethal battle of dominance." "Remember," Miss Loveson called from the edge, "this is just for fun. Do not break bones. We've just finished prelims, and I'd rather not patch any of you up." With that, they nodded in understanding. And then they shifted. It was still breathtaking to see, a blur of movement, the ripple of muscle, the way their energy shifted so sharply. Jaxon shifted first, transforming into a towering, deep, dark brown wolf, heavy with muscle. He looked just like Sienna's wolf, only bigger. No surprise there. Next came Elias, who took the form of a sleek black wolf. Rowan's transformation was swift and fluid. His blonde fur gleamed under the sun, the same golden color as his hair in human form. Cade became a smoky gray blur, standing tallest among all the wolves. The match began right away. Jaxon charged first, lunging at Rowan with a roar that made some of the students flinch. Rowan ducked just in time, displaying impressive footwork. Cade circled them both, eyes narrowed, waiting for the right moment to engage. Neither was Elias, who stood to the side, unmoving, his dark form appearing almost like a shadow amidst the wolves. Just then, Rowan lunged, not at Jaxon, but at Cade. Cade reacted instantly. Their bodies clashed in the center, growling fiercely, teeth snapping and paws kicking up dirt. Then at the last second, they both turned together, charging toward Jaxon. Jaxon fought hard, sending Rowan flying into the dirt with a furious blow. Cade dodged and then spun, retaliating with a powerful headbutt to Jaxon's ribs. Elias finally entered the fray, lunging at Jaxon's back, sharp and fast. But Jaxon caught him. They crashed to the ground, rolling. Just like that, both of them tumbled out of the border, disappearing from the fray. Cheers and gasps filled the field. Only 2 remained, the gray and the gold. They circled each other, and the tension in the air intensified 1,000-fold. They pounced at one another, showcasing a fight that was evenly matched. Suddenly, Cade struck low, flipping Rowan with a powerful shoulder move. Rowan lost his footing and skidded out of the stone arena, landing with a thud. Cade stood tall, panting hard, while the factions erupted into cheers for him. He shifted back. The others followed suit. They all appeared exhausted, and it was evident they had just fought an incredible match. I couldn't take my eyes off Cade. Sweat glistened on his strong chest as he sat atop a nearby rock, breathing heavily. I watched him, and my fingers unconsciously clenched around my water bottle. He needed it, didn't he? Before I realized it, I found myself standing. However, others had beaten me to him. Girls rushed forward like moths flitting toward a flame, and I pursed my lips, my posture relaxing as I prepared to sit back down. "Arden," Cade suddenly called, stepping through the crowd. He walked up to me, grabbed my water bottle, and took a long, thirsty drink. I watched him with wide eyes, momentarily stunned. "Do you have a handkerchief?" he asked, his voice low and casual. "Yeah." "Help me wipe my sweat, please." I stared at him, surprised, before letting out a soft laugh and shaking my head in disbelief. Carefully, I wiped the sweat from his temples, then his jaw, and finally the side of his neck. He looked down at me the entire time, his gaze unwavering. I didn't even realize the attention we were drawing from those around us. Only when Miss Loveson called out, "Mr. Callahan, point distribution," did I stop my ministrations. Cade gave me one last confident smirk and jogged off. In that moment, I noticed that most of the students were staring at us, eyes wide with surprise. The most apparent one was Jaxon, who glared at us with a fierce intensity, as if he wanted to set the entire forest on fire with his rage. I quickly looked away from him, but soon found myself meeting Rowan's gaze instead. He yanked my water bottle from behind me, preparing to open it, but I swiftly grabbed his hand to stop him. He quickly shifted the position of our hands, now placing his on top of mine. I attempted to pull away, but he held on tighter. I bit my lip. "What are you doing?" Before I could get a reply out, someone yanked my water bottle away. "I'm thirsty," he said. "Ask your faction members." He leaned in closer. "They're not you." I shook my head and finally managed to wrest my hand and the water bottle free from his grasp. "It's not my business," I muttered. "I'm heading back with Tessa." However, when I turned, Tessa had vanished. I frowned and surveyed the area, but there were no signs of her anywhere. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Tessa still hadn't returned. "Everyone, we're about to have dinner." Mr. Thompson's voice boomed across the campsite. "Please head to the clearing for the food." The aroma of roasted meat wafted through the air, melding with the earthy dampness that accompanied the coming night. I remained rooted in place, scanning the trees and cabins. Students began drifting toward the clearing in pairs and groups, laughter and conversation resonating across the grounds. Yet there was still no indication of her whereabouts. "Have you seen Tessa?" I inquired of some students who passed by. "Nope," one replied distractedly. I bit my lip and turned away, only to bump directly into someone's chest. "Whoa," Cade muttered, steadying me with his hand. "Where are you rushing off to?" I was looking for Tessa. I let out a deep, frustrated breath. "Since the battle, I haven't seen her." Cade's brows furrowed in concern. "She hasn't come back?" "No." He paused momentarily, then placed his hand gently on my arm. "Let's eat first, I'll help you look for her afterward. As her alpha, it's my responsibility too." His voice was calm and reassuring, but I couldn't shake the gnawing, bad feeling in my chest. I nodded reluctantly and allowed him to walk with me toward the food line. But I couldn't relax. Where could she be? Her belongings were still in the room. She wouldn't leave without saying anything. She simply wouldn't. Right? I moved forward in the line, dazed, until someone handed me a plate. Barely looking at it, the realization hit me like a punch in the gut. Tessa had been acting differently every time she was around Rowan. Could I have been so wrapped up in everything else that I failed to notice what was right in front of me? I knew they shared some sort of connection. I had seen the way she looked at him sometimes, even when she tried to hide it. And now that I reflected on it, her distance and silence in his presence all made perfect sense. I needed to find her. Without thinking, I shoved the plate into the hands of the person behind me, who cheered, "Thanks," and then sprinted off. I tilted my head slightly, trying to catch her scent by calling on my wolf. A faint trace lingered. Following it across the grass past the flickering firelight, I raced back to the cabin. Her scent grew stronger. I burst inside, my frown deepening. Sienna? She too had disappeared since the battle finished, so seeing her here was a bit surprising. She turned away from the mirror. "There you are," she said, her tone laced with annoyance. "I've been looking for you since earlier." My frown deepened further. "What?" She sighed and shook her head, crossing her arms defiantly over her chest. "Your friend. I saw her near the cliff earlier while I was, hooking up with someone. What's her name again?" "Tessa?" "Yeah, that girl," she said, shaking her head. "She didn't want to come with me. I shouldn't even be saying this, but it's annoying. I don't want to be disturbed later at night if she's still not back." "Show me, now." "Geez," she muttered, lazily slipping on her shoes. "Why am I even helping you?" I didn't answer. I was already halfway out the door. Above us, the sky had turned an ominous gray, low rumbles of thunder sounding in the distance. "Ugh, why are you so fast?" Sienna complained behind me. "Do you have some sort of death wish or something?" "Just take me there," I demanded. She still looked annoyed as she led the way through the trees, mumbling under her breath. The trail narrowed and the dirt transformed into slick stone as we approached the cliffside. Her scent was growing even stronger, but something felt off. There was no fresh trail. "This is it," Sienna said. We stood at the cliff's edge. The lake below shimmered faintly in the fading light. A cool breeze stirred my hair, heavy with the scent of impending rain. I turned to her. "Where is she?" Sienna didn't respond. My pulse raced in anticipation. "Sienna," I said slowly, observing the way her jaw tightened. "Where is she?" She finally looked at me, and an ugly smile slowly crept onto her lips. "It's long overdue," she said. The first drop of rain splashed against my cheek. "Goodbye, Arden." Before I could react, her foot slammed into my stomach. Pain exploded in my ribs. The world tilted, the edge of the cliff crumbling away beneath me. I reached out instinctively, but there was nothing to grab, only air. And then I was falling. The wind roared in my ears. The last sound I heard before darkness swallowed me whole was the distant rumble of thunder. Tessa. I didn't know how long I had been there. The lake lay still before me, dark as a sheet of glass, reflecting the rising moon and the gold-streaked sky above it before the last traces of light completely vanished. My eyes were puffy, perhaps even a shade of red. I had cried for far too long, and here I was, reduced to this state. A small chuckle escaped my lips as I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the darkening waters. My eyes looked like they had been devoured by 100 cockroaches. However, that fleeting amusement faded quickly when I remembered the situation I was in. If I told Arden about all this, maybe I wouldn't feel so impossibly lonely. Maybe she'd say something that would make everything feel normal again. She was the only one who could do that, the one who wouldn't look at me with either pity or confusion. Nobody knew what had really happened, not even Rowan. Only my older sister was aware of the details, and even then, it wasn't the whole story. I stayed beside the lake for a while, hoping the swelling around my eyes would diminish, but the sun was sinking quickly, and I knew I had to head back. It was late. Dinner must have already started. With a resigned sigh, I knelt next to the water and splashed my face with its coolness before standing up and making my way back to the clearing. By the time I returned, the warm light from the campfires had replaced the sunset. The fragrant scent of roasted meat and smoke filled the air, and everyone seemed to be having a grand time at dinner. My eyes scanned the crowd, searching for Arden. Someone from the west nudged their head toward the woods. "She was looking for you earlier," they said around a mouthful of food. "I think she went out into the woods." "What?" I gasped. My pulse quickened. I looked around again, trying to stay calm, and then I unexpectedly bumped into someone, Rowan. For a moment, the world paused. Our eyes met, and I felt it again. That stupid jolt, those sparks I had tried so hard to ignore. I could barely catch my breath. But where was Arden? I stepped back quickly, shaking my head and brushing past him. I couldn't afford to dwell on that now. I needed to find Cade. The shadows of the campfire danced across the trees, and then I spotted him, deep in conversation with some of his faction members. I ran to him, my heart racing with urgency. "Alpha!" I called, breathless. Cade turned immediately, concern etched on his face. "Tessa? Arden? Did you see her?" I asked, my worry spilling over into my voice. Cade's brow furrowed. "Aren't you two together?" I bit my lip. "I just needed some time. I went to take a break, and I haven't seen her since." Cade's posture shifted in an instant. His eyes sharpened, his body becoming still, alert like a hunter. "Everyone, listen up," he barked suddenly. "Arden is missing. Start searching this area." People around us stirred with alarm, dropping their utensils and standing quickly. Some grabbed flashlights, while others shifted on the spot, growling softly, sniffing the air. Just as I turned to join the search, someone caught my eye. She stood off to the side, her mouth curled in a way that was not quite a smile, but there was no trace of concern on her face. Something inside me snapped. "You!" I shouted, storming toward her. Sienna blinked, her brows rising in confusion. "What's your problem?" Before she could finish that thought, I lunged forward, grabbing a fistful of her perfect hair and yanking it back. "What the hell?" she shrieked, stumbling backward. "You did something, didn't you?" I hissed. "You must have done something." "You're crazy," she shouted back, struggling to push me off. "What are you talking about? Why would I do anything? Let go." I held tightly to her hair, compelling her to confess. I recognized that look on her face now. I had seen her not long ago after the battle, muttering curses under her breath, her glare directed squarely at Arden. In my fury, I failed to notice how she quickly reached for the nearest object. Someone had carelessly left behind a cup of tea on the table, hot and scalding. She snatched it up, and my eyes widened as I let her go, just in time for her to splash the tea toward me. However, Rowan stepped in front of me. The tea splashed across his shoulder and chest. My mouth dropped open. "Rowan," I gasped, He winced slightly, glancing down at his soaked shirt. I didn't mean, Sienna stammered. Jaxon had finally arrived. Rowan locked eyes with him. Control your faction members, he said in a low voice. What's going on? Jaxon demanded. Cade stepped forward, a grave expression on his face. Arden is missing. What? Jackson's demeanor shifted immediately, his gaze swinging toward Sienna. Did you have anything to do with it? Cade pressed, his eyes boring into her. Sienna stuttered. No, I didn't. Why would I? I don't know what you're... She went into the woods with her, a voice piped up from the crowd. Everyone turned to face the source of the interruption. It was a boy, slim, glasses fogged up with fear, clutching his plate nervously. I was behind Arden in line. I saw her follow Sienna. They walked off together. But only Sienna came back. All eyes shifted again toward her, an unspoken tension building in the air. Cade's entire expression darkened. Sienna began to tremble, her voice quaking as she protested. I didn't mean to. I didn't do anything. Jaxon seized her wrist suddenly, his grip firm. Where did you take her? I didn't, she cried, eyes wide with desperation. Why are you all looking at me like that? I'm hurt too. Cade stepped forward, his tone unmatched in intensity. You've been left off the hook for too long, Sienna. I hope you regret everything, he added. And then, without another word, he shifted. Fur ripped through his skin as he transformed into a large, dark gray wolf, taking off into the trees with powerful strides, paws thudding against the earth. Where are you going? Rowan called after him, but Cade didn't even look back. Rowan's jaw set tightly. We'll follow. Cade's voice drifted back like a chilling echo. Take care of your injury first. And then he was gone, tearing through the woods like a shadow, guided purely by instinct. Rowan moved to follow Cade, his feet already leaving the clearing when I called out, Rowan, wait! I grasped his wrist, desperate to hold him back. He tried to shrug me off, but I tightened my grip, pointing at his shoulder. Please, let's treat that first. His brow furrowed, yet he sighed heavily, relenting as I pulled him toward the cabins. His steps were slow, reluctant. I didn't blame him. If I weren't so shaken myself, I'd be racing through the trees, screaming for Arden's name too. Once inside the room, the door clicked softly behind us, sealing us in. I had to hold my breath for a moment, as his scent enveloped my senses entirely. Rowan's scent had always been strong and grounding, but here, in this small space, it was overwhelming. I found myself trembling as I reached for the first aid kit in the drawer. He sat on the edge of the bed, his shirt discarded, revealing the steam of the tea burn that was now fading into angry red skin. I dabbed at the burn gently, careful with every movement. He winced slightly, but didn't complain. She's going to be all right, Rowan muttered, breaking the heavy silence. I looked at him, searching for a glimmer of reassurance. Because Cade won't let her get lost, I whispered. I know that. Rowan didn't reply. He merely looked away, his jaw clenched, his eyes roaming skeptically toward the window. I swallowed hard and pulled my hands back once I'd finished. It's done, I murmured, hoping to ease the tension. Rowan stood, his body tense, shoulders still taut from the earlier conflict, or perhaps from the weight of us. Can we talk for a moment? I asked softly. Just a moment, Rowan. After we find Arden, can we talk? We never got to talk after that day, after you found out. His hand hovered over the doorknob, and he didn't turn around, not even once. I have to go look for Arden, he replied instead. And then, just like that, the door slammed shut behind him. Gone again. Arden. I blinked my eyes open. Pain immediately flared across my shoulder blades and thighs. My arms felt as though I had used them to wrestle the ground itself. I tasted dirt. My head throbbed, and my lips were dry. It was so dark. I groaned, pushing myself up from the forest floor, my body screaming in protest. I definitely rolled down the cliff, probably hitting every root, rock, and regret along the way. But I was alive. Thank the goddess for my wolf genes, because without them, I probably would have cracked my skull open and been left for dead. I blinked again, slowly adjusting to the lack of light. Another benefit of being a shifter was my night vision. Well, sort of. It wasn't perfect, but it still allowed me to make out faint shapes and silhouettes around me. What the hell was this place? I looked up, but the cliff edge was nowhere in sight. I must have tumbled really far. My hand instinctively moved to my ribs, wincing at the sharp jab of pain that shot through me. Yeah, definitely bruised, or maybe even cracked. I breathed carefully through my nose, trying not to trigger the pain again. That bitch. That actual certified, perfume-drenched, venom-laced bitch. But despite the betrayal burning in my chest, another worry began creeping into my thoughts. Tessa. Was she safe? Was she okay? I sat down on a large flat rock and stared into the endless dark surrounding me. At least let Tessa be all right. One of us should be okay, because I definitely wasn't. As I looked around, the trees above me swayed gently, the wind cool against my skin. Our campsite had been beautiful, but this part of the forest felt untouched. I rubbed my arms, trying to generate some warmth. As I shifted slightly on the rock, something beneath it gave way. The rock tilted suddenly, throwing me off balance. I stumbled forward, catching myself with a hiss. When I looked back, the stone had flipped, revealing something hidden underneath it. Curious and cautious, I crawled over, brushing away dirt and leaves. My fingers found the hard edge of something small and compact. I pulled it out. A chest? It was tiny, probably no bigger than my hand, but it felt surprisingly heavy. Strangely heavy for something so small. The wood looked old, worn by time, but not damaged at all. I furrowed my brow and turned it in my hands. And then it glowed. "Shit!" I yelped, dropping it immediately. A soft hum echoed as it hit the forest floor, illuminating the nearby trees. My heart slammed against my ribs. What the hell was that? I waited a second, then picked it up again with trembling fingers. It glowed once more, bright but not blinding, casting just enough light to make me feel safe. I squinted and noticed the engraving on the top, P+B. I frowned. "Peanut butter?" I muttered, chuckling dryly. It must have been a lover's box tucked away in the woods, buried like some secret love story that no one wanted to be found. Well, sorry to the mystery couple, but I was keeping this thing. I needed the light. Holding it with one hand, I stood and began walking. The trees eventually thinned, and up ahead, I saw a body of water. A lake, finally, a point of reference. I picked up my pace, my heart thumping with cautious hope, but something was off. This wasn't the same lake as before. That one had been smaller. This one was massive. It stretched far across the valley, its water reflecting nothing but the faint shimmer of stars and moonlight. I scanned the area, searching for any familiar features. However, as my eyes roamed the surroundings, a low guttural growl caught my attention. My breath caught in my throat. I turned slowly, and there, barely 10 meters away, a hulking shape lumbered into view. A bear, a black bear. Its eyes gleamed as it sniffed the air, my blood, probably. "Shit," I whispered. "If it's brown, lay down. If it's black, fight back." I could fight. I could shift. But one look at my still bruised legs and stiff arm told me I wouldn't last 5 seconds. The bear let out another guttural sound, rising up onto its hind legs. I backed up, and the bear wasted no time in responding. Panic surged through me. My mind spun. I did the only thing I could think of. I threw my bag to the ground, hoping to distract it, and ran. My legs burned as I sprinted for the edge of the lake. The bear roared behind me, closing the distance. I had no idea where I was going. I didn't think. I leapt. The cold smacked into me like a wall, ripping the air from my lungs as I plunged into the lake's depths. The last thing I heard before going under was the bear's menacing snarl, and the way the world became muffled as it disappeared into the dark waters around me. Drowning had to be better than getting mauled. At least I would look more presentable at my funeral with an intact face. However, that thought didn't erase the fear that gripped me in the water. I thrashed beneath the surface, but it felt as though I were sinking instead of swimming. My limbs were stiff, my chest burned. Every memory of fear I had ever buried came roaring back, louder than the blood pounding in my ears. I heard a muffled growl above, still sharp and clear against the lake's heavy silence. Then, even that sound faded. Only the water remained. I wanted to scream, but the panic had already sunk too deep. Just then, something leapt into the water. Could bears swim? However, I felt a pair of arms wrap around my waist instead, lifting me as water rushed past my skin. My vision cleared for just a brief moment. I was being pulled upward. A gasp tore through me as we breached the surface, and I choked on air and sobs all at once. Arden. That voice. "Cade," I gasped, barely able to speak between coughs and tears. "I'm here." His voice was firm but gentle. How had he found me? I tracked your scent, he said, answering the silent questions in my mind. My fingers clutched his shoulder, then slid to the nape of his neck, holding on as if I would lose him if I let go. I pressed my face against his chest as I sobbed, the tears blending with the lake water on my cheeks. I couldn't even finish. I thought I was going to die. You're not, he said simply, holding me tighter. You're safe now. The bear? I whispered, fear creeping back into my voice. Don't worry about it. His voice was tight. However, the sharp metallic scent of blood filled the space around us, so I knew what fate the bear had met. Along with that, I noticed the blood on his right shoulder. I leaned back just a little. You're hurt. I've had worse. No, Cade. Arden. His voice was softer now. Let me hold you for one more minute. That silenced me. I wrapped my arms around him again, my forehead resting against his. My legs floated behind me, unconsciously treading water as he kept us steady in the middle of that wide, terrifying lake. I'm scared, I whispered, vulnerability creeping into my tone. I know, he said simply. I'm not going to let go. At that moment, the cold didn't feel so suffocating anymore. My chest eased. My hands weren't trembling as much. Slowly, carefully, I let myself breathe again. You're really here, I murmured, heart swelling with gratitude. That silence settled around us once more, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was warm. I wasn't even sure how long we floated there, wrapped in each other's arms. Eventually, Cade shifted his grip slightly. Can I move? He asked gently. I nodded, my cheeks warming. Yeah. He moved through the water, arms still around me. It felt like he was allowing me to adjust to the water rather than forcing me to navigate it. This man, this alpha, this infuriating, stupidly strong, warm, and careful man, he had jumped in after me, fought a bear for me, he saved me. Cade? Aren't you going to ask why I'm afraid of water? He didn't even hesitate. He shook his head. You have your story, I have mine. That's it? His eyes found mine in the moonlight. You don't owe me an explanation, Arden. You don't owe anyone anything. I stared at him for a long moment, my heart pounding, lips parted in surprise. But, he added, if you want to talk about it, if you want to learn how to be less afraid, I'll be there. Arden. The water didn't feel so cold anymore. I was floating on it like it weren't the very thing I had once feared most. I didn't even realize how far I had come until Cade let out a soft chuckle behind me. What? I asked, turning my head over my shoulder to look at him. You're doing it. Doing what? Swimming. I paused mid-paddle. The motion felt so natural now that it didn't even register in my senses. I had pushed through the lake without clinging to him, without hyperventilating or freezing up. The fear that had once paralyzed me was gone. Or maybe not entirely erased, but drowned out by something undeniably stronger. By him. I turned around, floating gently toward him. The moonlight caught the angles of his face, casting shadows across his cheekbones and highlighting the water that dripped from his jaw. I guess I am, I whispered. A small smile appeared on his lips. I told you I wouldn't let you drown. That warm flutter returned to my chest, filling me with a mix of excitement and gratitude. I smiled back, shyly, and kept kicking forward. We stayed like that for a few more minutes, gliding silently through the water, but I didn't notice how far I had gone until a sharp ache shot through my shoulder, causing me to wince. Ow. Cade was at my side in an instant. What is it? My shoulder. I think I twisted it when I fell. It's starting to hurt again. Without a moment's hesitation, he reached for me, his strong hands wrapping around my waist to support me. You should have said something sooner, he muttered, his brows furrowing in concern. I didn't notice until now. His grip adjusted slightly as I leaned into him, one of my hands slipping around his torso, and then lower, brushing against skin that was definitely not covered by fabric. I froze. It was warm, very warm. My fingers splayed instinctively over it before realization hit me like a slap. I gasped. Is that your? I'm naked, Cade said, completely unbothered. I shifted, remember? My face flamed. Oh my God, Cade smirked. You've seen it before, haven't you? That was different, I exclaimed, immediately trying to back away, but his hold on me was firm, unyielding. Was it? Yes, I hissed. I didn't mean to. My hand just, shut up! His eyes sparkled with mischief. You can touch it again if you want. Cade! I slapped at his chest, and he burst into laughter. In retaliation, I splashed him, sending a wave of water crashing against his face. He blinked in surprise before retaliating, pulling me under for a second before letting me pop back up, sputtering. "You are the worst," I shouted between giggles. He grinned. "You like it." I rolled my eyes, unable to completely stifle my laughter. Our splashing turned into spinning, letting the water carry us around in a strange little dance. It was utterly ridiculous. Just then, as if taken straight from a scene in the movies, everything went quiet. The world stilled. The laughter faded away. We simply stared at each other. His smile slowly softened, and I felt my own fade too, not because anything was wrong, but because it felt like something significant was unfolding between us. Cade drifted closer, and I didn't make any effort to move back. His hand reached out, brushing my wet hair away from my cheek. My breath caught as his thumb traced my jaw, so gentle and so careful, appearing unsure if this moment was allowed. But I didn't pull away. I leaned in, and then our lips met. Soft, warm, slow at first. The kiss eventually deepened, pulled by something we both instinctively recognized but couldn't quite fight against. The water rippled around us as he kissed me, his arms sliding up my back to hold me close. My fingers wrapped around his shoulders, anchoring me. The cold of the lake was forgotten. Everything outside of this moment faded away, except for his mouth and the way it moved with mine, hungry yet gentle all at once. The kiss was sweet. Then it turned a little desperate. Then it slowed again, like neither of us wanted it to end. Fuck. I'm in deep, aren't I? When we pulled apart, with barely an inch separating us, his forehead rested gently against mine. "Arden," he whispered, breathless. "Yeah?" He didn't say anything, and for a moment doubt crept into my mind. What about his honey? Am I treading into off-limits waters? The sharp hoot of an owl cut through the still night air, startling us both. I blinked up at Cade, suddenly too aware of the closeness between us, the way his arms still held me steady in the water, and how my body was pressed against his bare chest. My eyes widened, and I pulled back slightly, coldness creeping back into my skin like shame chasing after warmth. I stammered, pushing a damp strand of hair behind my ear. "Do you have any clothes?" Cade pursed his lips before shaking his head. "Just a towel." "I rushed here as soon as I found out Sienna led you to the woods." My brows furrowed slightly. "That bitch," I muttered under my breath. "When is she finally going to leave?" "Don't worry," he suddenly said as he led us both back to the shore. "It's happening soon." "Huh?" I asked, confused, but he was already pulling me up before I could ask another question. Then, my eyes involuntarily drifted down to his crotch before I turned away. I could hear him wrap the towel around his waist, and I felt my cheeks heat up. A towel was definitely better than nothing. I turned back around and willed myself not to stare, even if he looked insanely good, with droplets running down his chest, muscles taut, and skin kissed by moonlight, even if the air was heavy and his scent was all I could breathe in. "We should contact the faction," I said, clearing my throat. "Let someone know we're alive." Cade nodded, suddenly serious. "I'll link my beta, just a sec." He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. "It's done. They'll stop looking, but we won't move until daylight. It'll be difficult to find our way in the dark like this." "I'm cold," I admitted softly, shivering as the night wind hit my skin. He frowned slightly. "We'll find shelter. I saw a cabin nearby when I was tracking your scent." I raised an eyebrow in curiosity. "Cabin?" He pointed. "That way. Not far." I nodded, sighing in relief. With that, I grabbed the wooden chest and followed him. Cade glanced at it with confusion the moment it lit up. "What is that anyway?" I shrugged. "No clue. It was under a rock, but it lights up when I hold it." "Huh." He frowned, finding it peculiar. We didn't talk much after that. We just walked through the thick grass and over roots and stones until the trees finally parted to reveal a small wooden structure nestled against the hillside. Cade approached the door and gave the knob a twist. "Locked, of course." "Hold this," he said, handing me the towel. "Well, the end of it. Thank God." With a swift movement, he crouched near the lock, pulled something sharp from behind his ear, and picked it. Click. "Where did you learn that?" I asked, intrigued. "Don't ask questions you don't want the answers to," he smirked, opening the door. Warm air greeted us. The cabin was cozy. It felt like someone had just been there, or perhaps still lived here. It had a leather couch, a tiny kitchen, a fluffy rug, and a small stone fireplace with still warm coals inside. Who lives here? I asked, casting my gaze around. Cade shrugged. We'll just have to explain later if we find the owner. Then he gave a half smile and dropped down onto the couch. I hovered awkwardly, my arms wrapped tightly around myself. With the coals heating the air around us, his scent intensified. It was stifling one moment, icy the next. My pulse quickened and my skin tingled. I sat on the opposite end of the couch. I was acutely aware of the sound of his breathing, of the droplets of water sliding down his chest, soaking into the towel. He glanced at me. I looked away, my heart racing. Seconds ticked by. The room buzzed with tension. Or maybe it was just me, the way my fingers fidgeted against my leg, the way my eyes kept darting to his collarbone and then away, the way I tried not to think of how it felt to be wrapped in his arms just minutes ago. Cade shifted beside me, suddenly breaking the mounting tension. Fuck it. I blinked in surprise and turned my head, catching a glimpse of him standing up. He took one step toward me, then two. You're way too beautiful right now to resist. Arden. His words still echoed in the small room. You're way too beautiful right now to resist. I didn't even have time to respond. My fingers bunched in his towel, holding on to him. Cade, I muttered against his lips, pulling back just slightly. There are no cameras. It's not for points, he murmured between kisses, his forehead resting against mine. Something inside me cracked open, and I pressed my lips back to his like I'd been waiting all this time. My arms wrapped around his neck, his wrapped around my waist. His hands were rough, but gentle. In a stranger's house with a guy I was sure I couldn't stand when we first met, now here I was, holding on to him like he was the only warmth left in the world. I knew it didn't make sense. I shouldn't be, but I couldn't help it. Not when he looked at me like I mattered. Not when he jumped into freezing water and carried me out without hesitation. Not when he whispered, "I'm here," like it was a promise he'd always keep. I like Cade. I really do. Maybe I like him too much. He was cold sometimes, guarded, harsh even, but then he'd smile or say something soft, and that coldness would melt into something warm, something I found myself clinging to. And right now in this quiet cabin where no one was watching and nothing was expected of us, I let myself fall a little harder. I didn't know what would happen after this night. But I knew what I wanted now. I wanted him. "Can I touch you?" he whispered. The man always valued consent, too. With a small smile, I nodded. "Yes," I whispered back. Immediately his arms roamed and explored my body. I relished how rough his body felt against mine, adoring how pleasing he felt to my skin. His body was adorned with faint scars, some of which I traced with my fingers to burn them into my memory. I trembled under his touch, throwing my head back as I let out a moan. "See, Cade," I stammered as I continued gripping his shoulder for support. Each portion of Cade's body was so hot that it burned me alive. With that, he slowly traversed his fingers from my shoulder down to my legs. There was a tiny portion of my mind that longed for him to touch me with the same feelings that I had. As I panted, trying to catch my breath, I embraced Cade even tighter. I wanted to whisper it to him already. Confess the contents of my heart. I like you, Cade Callahan. Arden, everything felt too good to be true, and maybe it was. Still, I wanted to hold on to it, just a little longer. When I opened my eyes, I found myself curled up against Cade's chest, my cheek pressed to the steady rise and fall of his breathing. His arms were still wrapped around me, even in sleep. He looked so peaceful like this, his brows relaxed, lips slightly parted. He hadn't experienced a nightmare this time. A small smile flickered across my lips as I watched him. Was it selfish to hope this moment meant something? Whoever this honey girl was, the one whose name had haunted his dreams, was it too much to believe he could forget her in my presence? Something twisted in my chest. Maybe I didn't want to know the answer. I stayed there for a while, letting my fingers lightly brush the ridge of muscle on his arm, trailing softly, lazily over his skin. It felt dangerous, allowing myself to feel this much, but I couldn't help it. Then slowly, his eyes fluttered open. When they finally landed on me, his smile appeared like an instinctive reaction, a warm greeting that made my breath catch. "Hey," he murmured, his voice heavy with sleep. "Hi," I replied, feeling a surge of warmth. "It's still early," I added, glancing at the still dark windows. The sun had yet to rise, and I didn't want to leave this moment just yet. My heart thundered in my chest, and I was terrified he could hear it. I had never felt this way with Jaxon. So why did it feel like this for Cade? Why did I crave his closeness? Why did my chest ache when he looked at me like that? There was no bond between us, and yet my wolf purred inside me as like he was everything we'd ever needed. He leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded quickly. "Yeah, just thinking." He hummed softly, then shifted back a little, giving me space. "Do you want to go on a run?" That question made my heart perk up. "Really?" I asked, unable to contain my excitement. His grin widened, lighting up his entire face. "Yeah, I thought it'd be nice. We can spare a little time before we head back." I scrambled to sit up, my eagerness bubbling over. He chuckled and followed right after, guiding me out of the cabin. The rain had finally stopped, but the world still glistened with dew. The grass bent gently under our paws. The air was cool, and the forest smelled fresh and inviting. We dashed between trees, splashing through puddles, our bodies moving instinctively, harmonizing with nature. At one point, Cade bumped his head against mine and took off faster, challenging me to keep up. I growled playfully and sped up, chasing him through the vibrant greenery. For a moment, I forgot everything. Forgot Sienna, the cliff, the games, and all the heaviness weighing on my heart. I just felt free. We made it back to the cabin a while later, panting but brimming with energy. Cade shifted first behind a tree, grabbing the towel we had left out earlier. I waited and then shifted as well, quickly pulling on the same shirt and sweatpants from the night before. Thankfully, they were dry. Thank the moon for that. I stepped inside and began brushing back my hair with my fingers. But then Cade froze at the doorway. He was sniffing something in the air, his entire body stilling, muscles coiling tight. "What's wrong?" I asked. He didn't respond immediately. His nose twitched slightly, his head tilting and eyes narrowing as he focused. "I think," he said slowly, "there's something under the cabin." My stomach dropped, a knot twisting inside me. "What do you mean by that?" He looked around cautiously and then crouched low to the floor near the kitchen corner, pressing a hand against the wood. "There's a draft here. I can smell something." I stepped closer, my heartbeat quickening with every passing moment. "We're not alone?" I whispered, dread creeping in. Cade shook his head. "It doesn't smell like a person, but something's definitely there." He reached beneath the cabinet, his fingers feeling along the edges until a soft click echoed through the silence. Then, a small piece of the floor shifted. He pulled it open. A trapdoor. "What the hell?" I breathed, astonished. Cade didn't fully open it yet. He glanced back at me, his expression serious. "Stay behind me." I nodded earnestly, at a loss for the right words to say. He opened the trapdoor slowly, and the scent hit me almost instantly. It was metallic, burnt, and tinged with something rotten. We both stared into the dark void below the cabin before we descended cautiously, Cade ensuring I was all right every step of the way. "What is it?" I asked again, my heart pounding harder with each passing second. Cade landed first, and he reached out his hand to help guide me carefully down from the rusty ladder. Compared to the cabin above, this space was unkempt and cluttered. As I turned around, a small gasp escaped my lips. Hiding in this hidden space was money. It wasn't just a few scattered bills, it was stacks of cash that appeared untouched. "Why is there so much? Who owns this place?" I questioned. "This doesn't seem like an emergency stash," Cade replied quietly, his brow furrowed. I stepped closer, my stomach churning at the overwhelming scent. It was filthy, tainted with something that didn't feel right. Greed, violence, and secrecy. Why would this be under a cabin in the middle of the woods? But then I turned, and that's when I saw it. A deeper passage, carved roughly into the earth behind the cellar, a tunnel that sloped downward like a den. Cade noticed me staring. "Stay here," he said quietly, but I was already moving. Curiosity, or perhaps instinct, propelled me forward. The scent changed, but it still hung in the air, intertwined with that of the money. My scream tore from my throat before I even realized it. 3 figures lay crumpled in the darkness, rotted and half covered by soil and collapsed wood, skeletal hands reaching toward each other. Cade was instantly behind me, pulling me against his chest, holding me tight as I trembled uncontrollably. "Don't look," he murmured against my hair. "Let's get out of here." But I couldn't move. "No," I whispered. We need to see who they were. Arden, he said softly, with a hint of urgency, a warning in his tone. Just a little closer, I insisted, looking up at him with wide, teary eyes. We have to help them, Cade. His jaw clenched, but he nodded, helping me step over a beam, careful to avoid disturbing anything. My gaze drifted across the remains. There was something on one of them, a glint of metal among the bone and tattered cloth. A necklace. I reached forward, carefully lifting it. The chain was tarnished, but the pendant still shone faintly beneath the dirt, an intricate small gold crest. We should take it, Cade muttered, eyeing it with suspicion. For evidence. Are we going to report this? I asked, my voice still shaky with disbelief. He didn't answer immediately. His eyes scanned the room again, sharper and more alert than before. A darkness lingered in his expression, one I hadn't seen in a while. First, he said, we need to know who this place belongs to. I nodded, but it seemed the question was answered soon when I noticed something. A word, carved on the concrete, etched deeply by what seemed like the nails of those trapped inside. I felt my heart break at the thought of their sheer desperation to escape. Whoever owned this cabin was one seriously messed up individual. I muttered, making out the first letter with my keen vision. Alan. I turned to Cade, my eyes wide, and he looked back at me with curiosity. Mr. Winters, I whispered, the realization washing over me. Arden. The scent of the trees refreshed my senses as we made our way back to the campsite. I kept my eyes fixed on the towering trunks, but my thoughts drifted far from the serene scenery. What we had witnessed in that cabin would linger in my mind for a long time. Cade and I made sure to place everything back in its proper order. Not a single item remained in sight, except for the necklace I had retrieved from the remains. We hoped this would ensure that no one discovered we had stumbled upon the secret hideout. What happens now? I asked quietly, breaking the heavy silence that enveloped us. My voice felt small and delicate in the stillness of the forest. Do you think this has something to do with the videos? Cade's jaw clenched as he stared straight ahead. It has to, he finally replied. Those videos exist for a reason. Winters probably sent us here to keep us out of the way, to make it seem like a favor or a break. But really, it was a cover-up, I said, finishing his thought. The explicit videos, the money, the bodies, all of it must be connected. That cabin has to belong to him. No one else would bury something so dark out there. Cade gave a small nod, the lines around his eyes deepening with concern. Elite hasn't been the same since he became headmaster. Everyone thinks he improved the academy, but they don't see what he's hiding. I shivered, drawing my arms around myself. He made it worse. He just covered it in gold and made people thank him for it. I'm going to get to the bottom of it, Cade said fiercely. I looked at him, and something stirred within my chest. For justice, I murmured softly. He glanced at me then, his expression softening for a moment. Cade expertly memorized the long, winding path until we finally reached the campsite. A handful of students remained, likely some had already returned to campus. Alpha Cade is here! Cade's beta shouted. Their faces lit up with relief as they turned toward us. Arden! Tessa cried out, throwing her arms around me. I staggered back a step, but quickly enveloped her in a tight embrace. You're okay, she breathed. I pulled back just enough to meet her gaze. I should be asking you that, I said softly. Tessa laughed lightly, swiping at her eyes. I'm fine. Goodness, Arden, you scared me. I'm sorry, I whispered, my heart heavy. I'm okay now. I'm glad you're safe too. From the side, I caught a glimpse of Sienna. She stood alone, her arms crossed tightly, her eyes downcast. Shame clung to her like a second skin. For a moment, I didn't say anything, choosing instead to look at her and amplify her discomfort. She didn't meet my gaze. Goodness, Miss Loveson said, rushing toward us. Her heels clicked furiously against the pavement. Do you two have any idea how worried we were? You disappeared without warning. We're fine, miss, Cade replied calmly, stepping forward. But if it's all right with you, we'd prefer not to report this. Miss Loveson looked between the two of us, her lips pursed in thought, but then she sighed and nodded. I won't. Thank goodness you're safe. Come along now, gather your things. The buses are boarding already. We don't want another scare like this. Cade turned to me, then to Tessa. I'll drive us back. Arden, are you okay to ride with me? Can I come too? Tessa asked quickly, her eyes wide with eagerness. Of course, Cade replied with a short nod, but not everyone was as willing to comply. Wait a minute, Rowan called, stepping forward, a hint of defiance in his voice. She doesn't need to go with you. I can drive them both. Cade tilted his head, unfazed. I already offered, Rowan. Just go ahead. Nearby, Elias observed quietly, while behind him, Jaxon leaned against a post, his eyes narrowed and jaw locked in tension. I didn't dare glance at either of them. Cade opened the car door and held it for me. Come on, he said gently. I didn't hesitate and stepped inside. Tessa followed after me, taking extra care as she maneuvered around my external injuries. The door closed behind us with a soft click, muffling the sounds of the forest. Cade slid into the driver's seat, and the car eased forward, the tension from the forest fading with every turn of the wheels. He didn't speak right away, and I didn't need him to. The silence between us was comfortable now. Then, after a few moments, he glanced over at me, his voice quiet. Sleep, Arden. You need a lot of rest. It felt as though his words were a spell, lulling me into slumber almost immediately. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the soft weight of a blanket over me and the familiar scent of my pillow. Blinking my eyes open, I felt disoriented, trying to piece together how I had ended up here. You're awake! Tessa's voice chirped from somewhere beside me. I turned my head and found her sitting cross-legged on the edge of my bed, already dressed, her hair pulled into a high bun. What time is it? I mumbled, my voice still rough from sleep. It's nighttime again, she responded. You were out cold. I sat up slowly, running a hand through my tangled hair. How did I get back here? Cade carried you, Tessa said, her eyes twinkling with excitement. It was so sweet, Arden. He was so careful with you, like you were made of glass. He gently placed you on the bed, tucked you in, and even made sure your head was resting on the softest pillow. My cheeks warmed instantly. He did not. Oh, he so did, she insisted. He even looked around our place and asked if everything was comfortable for us. Obviously, I said no. He hummed and nodded. I think he really cares for you, Arden. Is there something going on between you two? She followed up, her curiosity piqued. I shook my head a little too quickly. No. Tessa raised a brow, unconvinced. Really? No, I repeated, but this time it came out softer, quieter. A small twinge of disappointment followed, one I wasn't particularly proud of. But do you want there to be? She asked, leaning in closer. I groaned and covered my face with both hands. I don't know. Goodness, Arden, she said, a teasing smile on her face. You like Alpha Cade. My hand slid down just enough for me to peek at her. I think he just wants to protect me. That's what this is. He's true Alpha Cade. He protects people. No way, she said firmly, shaking her head. He doesn't look at other people the way he looks at you. You should just ask him. I don't know, I said again, though this time it wasn't about denial. It was simply the truth. I really had no idea. Cade had so much going on, much more than anyone really understood. Between the secrets beneath the cabin and the hidden truths we had uncovered, asking him how he felt about me felt selfish. Misplaced, even. Then there was the issue with Mr. Winters. I wanted to help Cade figure it out. I wanted to expose what was happening here, what Elite had become. Someone like him didn't deserve to keep that kind of power. Earth to Arden? Tessa asked, snapping me out of my thoughts. I turned to her and changed the subject. How about you? Me? Yeah, I nodded. That afternoon after the battle, you disappeared. I couldn't find you anywhere. The teasing in her expression faded immediately. She looked down at her hands, picking at her nails. I just needed space. If there's something wrong, you can tell me, I said gently. You always tell me to open up, and I want you to do the same, Tessa. I don't want you to feel like you're alone in this. I added softly, hoping to convey my support. Her lips pressed into a firm line, and I could see the internal struggle happening behind her eyes. It's Rowan, isn't it? I asked softly, finally breaking the silence. She flinched, just barely, but it was enough to convince me that Rowan was the source of her distress. I reached for her hand. What do you two have going on between you, if I may ask? For a long second, I thought she might not answer me. But then her shoulders slumped a little, and her voice came out in a quiet whisper. We're mates. Arden. Tessa didn't say another word after that. I wanted to ask, had Rowan known all along? What were they to each other now? but the way her fingers twisted nervously in her lap and her eyes steadfastly avoided mine told me that pressing further would only cause her to retreat into herself. It had already taken so much for her to admit it. Still, it made my chest ache. Mates weren't supposed to be secrets. Mates weren't supposed to hurt. I had hoped she would have a different fate than mine. In the short time I had known Tessa, I had come to realize she was a remarkably kind girl, devoid of sharp edges. We didn't speak of it again, and I allowed the silence to linger. Tessa would open up when she was ready. By the time the third period rolled around, I was halfway through a textbook on the political dynamics between packs when the announcement buzzed through the speakers overhead. All students report to the assembly hall immediately. Students shuffled in their seats, hastily gathering their belongings. Tessa and I exchanged a look before slipping out of our chairs and joining the crowd heading towards the hall. When we arrived, the assembly hall was buzzing with chatter, packed shoulder to shoulder with students and instructors. "Hey, glad I caught you," Owen chimed, making his way through the crowd to find us. He had been discharged from the hospital, and since that day it seemed Kieran had finally backed off. Well, for now at least. I caught sight of Sienna off to the side, and our eyes met momentarily, but instead of her usual fierce gaze, there was a flicker of anxiety in her expression as she nervously scanned the room, refusing to hold my gaze. Just then, I felt a hand on my wrist, gentle yet firm. Cade. He didn't utter a word, merely offered a small tug, inviting my friends and me to join his group in the corner of the hall. A smile tugged at my lips. A few paces away, I noticed Rowan taking a hesitant step in our direction. His brows were drawn furrowed, his lips parted, but after a second he hesitated. Then, without uttering a word, he retreated into the crowd, vanishing behind a wall of students. Finally, Headmaster Winters took the stage. He stood tall and proud, wearing that signature cheerful expression that seemed like a mask fixed to his face. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," he began, his voice echoing across the hall. "I promise not to take much of your time. As many of you know, our school has always valued performance, discipline, and strength, qualities that prepare our young leaders for the future of our world." I crossed my arms, watching closely, feeling Cade's shoulder brush against mine. "We have just finished tallying the latest results of the semester, including preliminary exams. I am pleased to announce that our top-ranking student in terms of academic excellence, combat scoring, leadership evaluations, and tactical performance," he paused dramatically, "is Alpha Cade Callahan." The entire room erupted into applause. Cade stood, bowing to acknowledge the crowd, but as he settled back into his seat, he turned to me, our eyes locking for a brief moment. In that instant, I knew we were both thinking the same thing. This was one step closer to uncovering what Winters was really hiding. Due to his exceptional ranking, Winters continued, Alpha Cade will represent the elite order at the upcoming United Factions Council meeting during the break. This is a rare honor, one typically reserved for only the most promising leaders of our generation. It was a door we desperately needed. Cade nodded in my direction, and I let out a deep breath of relief. Some students began preparing to stand, but it seemed Winters wasn't done just yet. He stepped forward, gripping the edge of the podium with intention. "There is one more announcement." The room stilled once again. "As many of you are aware, our current praetor, Bethany Varel, has served our country with strength and grace for over 2 decades. However, for this term, she has decided to step down from her position." A murmur spread through the crowd like wildfire. "I would like to formally announce," Winters declared, "that I will be running for praetor of our precious country, Fenra." Every inch of me froze. The title alone, praetor, signified ultimate control over the entire werewolf territory. Not just elite, not just one faction, all of it. Next to me, Cade went as stiff as stone. As applause erupted around us, mostly excited, with some hollering mixed in, I felt my head spin and a wave of nausea washed over me. A man like him does not deserve this country in any way, but it seemed only a handful of us were aware of that. After the assembly, my head was still spinning. I was still processing everything when someone suddenly tugged at my hand. "Can I talk to Arden?" Cade's voice was soft. I turned to see Owen and Tessa exchanging amused glances. "She's all yours," Tessa said, her grin stretching from ear to ear. Take her, Owen added, pushing me gently forward. Cade chuckled under his breath. Thanks, he said, and the moment he flashed a grin, they both froze mid-step. Dazzling, Tessa muttered, but we still heard it. I sighed as Cade's fingers wrapped gently around mine, pulling me away from the bustling crowd. He didn't say a word as he guided me through the halls and out past the south wing until we reached a path I hadn't ventured down in quite some time. The maze garden. It's been a while since we've been here, I said quietly, letting my fingers brush against the tall grasses that swayed gently in the breeze. Yeah, Cade replied. Nobody really comes here. We stopped at the very heart of the maze, allowing the heavy silence to envelop us. He's going to run as the praetor? I finally blurted, the words bursting forth like a dam unleashed. Seriously? Cade nodded slowly, biting the inside of his lip. That's what he said, and unless someone intervenes, he's likely to win. My heart plummeted at the thought. The praetor. Bethany Vorel had been the name we grew up hearing in stories. She was the woman who had instigated the breaking 30 years ago, a bloody civil war that nearly tore our kind apart. She wasn't a soldier, a royal, or even had an alpha bloodline when she started, just a girl with an audacious vision. She became praetor at the age of 20. She was the one who divided yet united us simultaneously, breaking the tradition of solely having one royal family without democracy. Her name was synonymous with peace. She'd been re-elected twice. Now at just 50, she still had many years ahead of her. Why isn't she running again? I asked softly. She's still strong. The people love her. Cade was quiet for a moment. She's sick. I didn't say anything initially. The breeze picked up, rustling the tall hedges surrounding us, as if nature itself was mourning. It felt akin to hearing that the moon was on the verge of falling from the sky. Bethany was our constant. She was the reason our world remained intact. She was the best leader we ever had, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. I know, Cade replied. That's why it's terrifying. Without her, Winters sees an open path to seize control, and with his polished image and the reforms he's falsely claimed credit for, people think he's the obvious choice. I loathed how accurate he was. I exhaled slowly, allowing my back to rest against one of the stone benches near the entrance of the garden. I can't lie, Cade. I used to think the same thing. If I hadn't discovered what we did, I probably would have voted for him too. Cade sat down beside me, his gaze scanning the horizon, searching for clarity. A lot of people will, and if he wins, he'll have complete control, not just over elite, but over everything. I swallowed hard, the implications settling in my chest. We can't let that happen. We won't. He turned to me. But we need evidence, real, incontrovertible evidence, the kind that cannot be twisted or denied. I nodded slowly, digesting his words. You think you'll find something during the United Factions visit? I have a feeling, Cade replied, a determined glint in his eyes. There are too many things that don't add up. The funding changes, the abrupt disappearances, and the fact that Winters keeps pushing for centralized control over the council. Something's brewing beneath the surface. I'll be vigilant, watching everything, every conversation, every hallway. If there's anything amiss, I'll find it. I stared down at my hands, wrestling with a surge of anxiety. Will it really be all right? Cade didn't answer immediately. Then, gently, he reached for me. His hand found the back of my head, and he pressed a soft kiss to my forehead. I froze, caught off guard. His lips lingered for just a fraction longer than necessary. My heart raced, lodged in my throat like an unsteady drumbeat. I'll make sure it is, he murmured. I'm determined to expose him. His words sank deep, steadying the turmoil within my chest. Yet even as I looked up at him, my heart aching with a sensation too fragile to name, one question refused to leave my mind. Why was he still so gentle? Why was he still so sweet? And what was I supposed to do with the way it made me feel? Arden. The library was quiet except for the occasional rustle from the front desk. Alara was busy as usual, and she couldn't even fully acknowledge our presence when we arrived. The first round of the Academy eliminations was tomorrow, and Elias and I had been going over everything from strategy manuals to history textbooks, trying to prepare for whatever was coming. My eyes ached from reading. My brain buzzed with so much information, I was sure I'd start dreaming in battle formations. I'm going to look for more books, I mumbled, rising from my seat. Elias nodded, still focused. Try the far left wing. The archives have some older stuff. Could be useful. I wandered deeper into the library, my fingers skimming along leather-bound spines and gold-lettered titles. The smell of paper and time was thicker here, comforting and strange all at once. Most of the books hadn't been touched in decades. Something called to me. I don't know how else to explain it. A hum beneath the silence, a faint tug in my chest, like a whisper without sound. I turned down a narrow aisle I hadn't noticed before. My hand paused on one of the books, a small, unassuming thing. The leather was cracked and faded, and it didn't have a title unlike the others. Still, I pulled it off the shelf. My heart beat just a little faster as I cradled it in my hands and walked back to our table. Elias looked up when I returned. Found something? I nodded slowly, taking my seat again. It didn't look like any ordinary book. I opened it to the first page and realized what it was. A diary. The handwriting was loopy and feminine, the ink faded to a soft brown. I'm so excited to be an elite. I never thought I'd make it past the entrance exams, but here I am. The campus is even more beautiful than I imagined. They say there's a new headmaster. He's kind, apparently. He reformed the dorms, opened new resource centers, and even allowed certain wolves from lesser packs to apply. Everyone's saying he's changing everything. I blinked. The date was marked clearly at the top, August 13th, 2006. 9 years ago. It was when Winters recently approved of the new point system. I turned the page. The next entry was just as cheerful. The girl wrote about her classes, her friends, and how she was planning to join the Healers Guild. There were sketches in the margins, flowers, wolves, initials. But as I kept reading, something changed. The ink got darker, more rushed, the entries shorter. There's something off. I can't explain it. I just feel watched. He was there again. I turned around and he was just standing there, smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. I swallowed. My fingers trembled slightly. No one believes me. I told my doormate, but she said I was imagining things. Still, he's always there. I don't like it. The handwriting became messier, unsteady. I can't leave. I tried to ask for a pass to visit home, but they said I was needed for a special project. What does that even mean? Aileen is gone. They said she dropped out, but her things were still in the room. All her clothes, her photos. She would never leave without them. My breath caught in my throat. I turned another page, and something fell out. A photograph. 3 girls, smiling with arms around each other, standing in front of the main elite gates. The girl in the middle wore a small gold necklace, delicate and familiar. No. I dug into my bag and pulled out the necklace we'd found in the hidden cellar. I held them side by side. They were identical. I flipped to the final entry. My eyes darted across the words, nearly unreadable now. The handwriting shook. He told me to stay quiet. He said it was for the good of the school, that I was special. I don't feel special. I feel like I'm being watched every second. The others are gone. Please, I don't want to go. I still want to meet my mate. Whoever finds this, please don't let him win. The last page was blank. Hey, Elias said quietly. Are you all right? I hadn't noticed how tightly I was gripping the pages until he reached across and gently pried one of my hands away. My voice shook. Yeah, I need a second. He studied me, concern in his features. We don't have to keep going today if you're tired. No, I said quickly. No, I'm okay. But I wasn't. This was proof. It was not solid, undeniable proof, but it was enough to know that the rabbit hole went even deeper than we thought. These girls, these victims, had been trapped for nearly 10 years, and no one even remembered their names. I glanced at Elias. If there was anyone who knew more about this country, it would be him. And as much as it terrified me, I knew I had to ask. I turned to him. He was back to flipping through one of the preparation manuals, focused again. I cleared my throat. Elias? He hummed, still scanning a page. What do you think about Headmaster Winters? The question cut through the silence. Elias stilled. His fingers paused mid-turn, and he didn't speak for a long moment. Then softly he closed the book and leaned back in his chair. That's a complicated question. I know, I said, but I want to know your honest opinion. He looked up at me now, something unreadable in his eyes. You really want to know what I think? I nodded. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. I think this school is too good to be true. My brows furrowed. I mean, he continued, Look at it, Arden. Elite is the most prestigious academy in the country, maybe even the continent. The facilities are state-of-the-art, the curriculum is intense, innovative, and powerful. It trains warriors, strategists, healers, scholars, and diplomats all under one roof. It produces the best of the best. We all came here because of that, because everyone says this is the place where greatness is born. He shook his head. I think the system isn't fair, though. He let out a soft laugh. It's designed not to be. The points, the competition, the social hierarchy, they don't just reward strength or brilliance. They reward ruthlessness, obsession. This place doesn't bring out the best in people, it brings out the worst. And the school pretends that's a good thing, that it's some sort of preparation for the real world. My throat tightened. That's what they think the United Factions is for, he added matter-of-factly. To breed that competition, to show that power means survival, that ambition beats morality. But wasn't the United Factions created for peace? I asked. Bethany started the breaking. That was supposed to mean harmony, unity, and diversity. Elias nodded solemnly. Bethany's whole vision was that different people, different kinds of wolves, could work together. That diversity made us stronger, and she proved it. That's why she became praetor in the first place. That's why she's been reelected all these years, because she gave people hope. He exhaled hard. I think Winters doesn't believe in that. He believes in conquest, in domination through excellence. He believes in winning at any cost. I rubbed my fingers over the old diary. You don't agree with it? No, he said simply. But I'm part of it. We all are. We chose to come here, didn't we? We wanted what Elite offered, and it does offer something remarkable. I can't lie about that. The education, the connections, the sheer prestige, it's unmatched. But it's still too good to be true, I murmured. He met my eyes. In situations like these where everything looks perfect on the outside, ask yourself this. If it were a war strategy, perfectly executed, clean, without a single loss, would you believe it? I frowned. No blood, no mess, just success. He tilted his head. Do you really think no one's been hurt, or do you think the losses were swept under the rug? My mouth went dry. I know students who came to Elite and never returned home, he said quietly. You probably do too, but it's always written off as psychosis, mental instability. The pressure got to them, they cracked. He tapped the table softly. You know what happens to wolves who break down in this school? They're shunned, treated like they never existed. My hand tightened around the photo. What about the point system? I asked suddenly. It started off with small stuff, but now students, they're expected to have sex with others, to gain points. That's not just toxic, it's anti-mate, anti-everything our kind believes in. Elias sighed, rubbing his temples. I know, but at Elite, wolves are trained to see their mates as an afterthought, something optional. What matters more is climbing the ranks, power over fate. He leaned back again. We're conditioned to like it that way. It makes us strong and untouchable. That's one part I agree with. I frowned. So it seemed Elias still agreed with some of the values that Mr. Winters instilled. But can you read into why Winters is running for praetor? I asked darkly. It's simple, Elias replied. If he wins Arden, he won't just change this school. He'll remake the United Factions in his own image. That same hierarchy, that same hunger. It'll become a place where only the strongest survive and the rest are forgotten. But can't the people see that this isn't beneficial? I asked, frustration bubbling in my chest. Don't they see what's happening? They see the surface, Elias said. Like most people do. They see the glory, the triumph, the results, not the damage. He looked at me, and for the first time, his eyes were solemn. I think you've dived too deep, Arden. I flinched. What do you mean? There are things in this school, he said carefully, things we aren't meant to find to look into. People who've tried to pull back the curtain haven't exactly made it out whole. I was silent for a moment, watching the light shift through the stained glass window, casting fractured colors across the floor. Let it go, he muttered, going back to his book without a care. I felt suffocated. I stood. I needed air. I needed space. I needed Cade. Without another word, I slipped the diary into my bag and walked briskly out of the library. The words from the girl's journal echoed through my mind like a ghost. Please don't let him win. And I wouldn't. Not if I could help it. Arden, I needed to see him. I didn't inform him beforehand. I didn't text, I didn't knock more than once, I didn't even hesitate. My feet carried me across the streets to Cade's private unit like my body had made the decision on its own. My heart pounded in my ears as I reached the front of his door. Was I being reckless? Maybe, but I couldn't breathe. Not after what Elias had said, and not after what I'd read. Somehow, the only person who could make sense of this feeling of chaos was Cade. I lifted my fist to knock, but before I could, the door creaked open. Cade stood there, shirtless, hair tousled. His eyes widened when he saw me standing there, breathless and desperate. Without thinking, I lunged forward and wrapped my arms around him. He caught me, his strong arms enveloping me as I buried my face against his shoulder. He smelled like pine and warmth, like comfort itself. "Arden?" he asked softly, concern seen across his features. "What's going on? Are you okay?" I didn't answer immediately. I merely held on to him tighter. It wasn't until his hand gently rubbed my back that I felt the sting behind my eyes finally begin to settle. I needed to see you," I breathed out. He pulled me back slowly, just enough to look at me. His brows furrowed deeply. "What happened?" Then something flickered in his expression. "Have you found out already?" he asked. "Found out about what?" "Sienna's expulsion." I looked up at him with wide eyes, my surprise mirroring his. "You didn't know?" he asked. I shook my head, confused. "What are you talking about?" Cade stepped aside to let me in, shutting the door behind us with a soft click. Someone from the faction caught her cheating. Cheating? "During the preliminary exams," he said, his tone serious. "It's one of the highest forms of misconduct at Elite." My lips parted in surprise. "That's grounds for immediate expulsion," he continued. "More than anything else, she should have been kicked out ages ago. Fortunately, there was concrete evidence this time." I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat. I looked at him again, this time with something lighter in my chest, and hugged him once more. He smiled against my hair and gently guided me toward the couch. We both sank into the cushions, the quiet hum of the setting sun wrapping around us like a warm blanket. "Thank you, Cade," I muttered after a while. "I didn't do anything," he whispered back, still holding me close. "She did this to herself." We lay in silence and warmth for a while before it snapped back to me why I had come here in the first place. I reached into my bag and carefully pulled out the diary and the necklace I had tucked away. Cade's brow furrowed as he noticed them. "I found this in the library," I murmured, setting the weathered journal on his lap. "It belonged to one of the students, from nearly 10 years ago." He turned the cover gently, his eyes scanning the first few pages as if searching for clues. "It starts off hopeful," I said, easing into the memory. "She talks about how excited she was to be at Elite, how great Winters was. But then, as it goes on, her entries change." I held up the photo. The image faded, but the girls were clear, smiling happy, completely unaware of the darkness that was coming. "She and her friends," I whispered. "The same ones we found. Cade, I think they were the ones buried beneath the cabin." His jaw tensed. He ran a hand down the page, murmuring, "This all lines up." "I think it started with the point system," I speculated. "The way she wrote about it, it felt new back then, but there were lines between the entries that made me feel sick. I think Winters wanted to participate directly at one point." Cade's eyes darkened as he flipped to another page. "Winters is a pervert." "Yes," I muttered, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "He built this system to feed off his fantasies, and we all bought into it. We let him make us believe this was normal. Who knows what he's doing with that footage?" Cade remained silent for a long time, processing the gravity of it all. Finally, he set the diary aside, his face hardening with resolve. "The United Factions meeting is next week. I'm going to infiltrate Winter's office," he declared. "What?" I sat up straighter, alarmed. "You can't do that alone." "I have to," he said firmly. "It's the only chance we'll get. He's letting me in because I'm the top student right now. It's a reward, technically. I can use that." "Then I'll come with you," I insisted. "No," he replied, shaking his head. My breath caught in my throat. "Why not?" He looked at me then. "Winters only gave permission for me, and besides—" "Besides what?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. "I don't want you to get hurt, Arden," he whispered, his gaze locking onto mine. "Anything but that." I was rendered speechless, the sincerity in his eyes leaving me momentarily without words. After a pause, I finally managed to find the right questions to ask. Why? Don't you want me to get hurt? He hesitated, his lips parting to answer. Because. My heart stilled, my breath caught in my throat, and every part of me craved to hear what would come next. Because what, Cade? Because you care about me? Because this means something to you too? Because you like me too? But just as he was about to speak, his phone buzzed violently, shattering the moment. Cade glanced at the screen, and I saw a shift in his expression, a subtle change that made my stomach twist. Wait for me, okay? He said, his voice dropping to an unexpectedly soft tone. Just stay right there. I'll take this. He was already striding toward the balcony, pushing the glass door open with a soft creak and stepping into the tranquil embrace of the night. I remained seated, my hands folded tightly in my lap, still reeling from our exchange. My chest rose and fell a little too quickly, a rapid rhythm that felt out of place. I found my gaze lingering on the diary on the coffee table, the photo beneath it. The necklace lay beside them, its shine dulled in the warm glow of the light. Just moments ago they had held my focus, but now my thoughts were miles away, racing in circles. The words "because" echoed endlessly in my mind, an unresolved riddle. But he didn't finish. He didn't say it. Compelled by something inside me, I stood slowly, as if pulled toward the balcony by an invisible thread. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, yet here I was, unable to resist the pull. My bare feet padded softly across the floor, and I paused by the door, standing just far enough to remain out of sight but close enough to catch the sound. Honey? Cade's voice drifted in, light and familiar, wrapped in warmth. Yes, I'm fine, he said. I'm heading home. All right? Yes, I promise. Please, honey, don't do this. I flinched, backing away from the door. The name rang in my ears like a cruel reminder, a sharp intrusion. Honey. Again, that name. The one he called out in his sleep, the one that haunted his dreams. I sank onto the couch, the air suddenly thick and suffocating. My heart clenched painfully in my chest and my hands turned cold. So she was real. He still called her that. Still spoke her name with tenderness, with love. Please, honey, don't do this. I pressed my hands against my chest, trying to hold back a tide of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. But it was already too late. The floodgates had opened. All the thoughts came rushing in, relentless and cruel. Was she his mate, someone from his past, a love lost that he couldn't let go of? Was I merely a placeholder, just someone convenient to hold until the real one came back into his life? Arden. Cade's voice snapped me out of my spiraling thoughts. He burst back through the balcony door, urgency carved into every feature of his face. I need to leave. I'm so sorry. I stood up slowly, refusing to meet his eyes. I can take myself back. Cade reached out slightly. Are you sure? I'm sure, I whispered, stepping back to put more distance between us. He looked torn, caught between two conflicting desires. No, it's late. You can stay here until the morning. I'll be back, okay? I promise. I managed a nod, a weak and hesitant affirmation that was all I could muster. But stay. How could I stay? How could I possibly sit in his space when I didn't even know who she was or what I truly meant to him? He hovered at the door for a moment, indecision playing across his features. Then, with one lingering look at me, he left. The door clicked shut behind him, and I found myself alone, enveloped in silence. Alone with questions that burned both my heart and throat, craving answers I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. Cade didn't come back the next day, or the day after that. And now, on the eve of the Academy Wars finale, the match that would ultimately decide which academy would claim victory for the year, I still hadn't seen him. His seat in class remained conspicuously empty. He didn't respond during the roll call. Even his friends didn't seem to know where he was. But I couldn't stop thinking about him. I tried to shake it off. I attempted to focus on the big match ahead, but everything around me became nothing more than noise in the absence of Cade. As I rounded the corner of the East Hall, lost in distraction, I collided with someone tall and cold. "Oh, sorry," I muttered, instinctively pulling back, but the scent that came from him froze me in place. Mr. Winters. He looked down at me, a polite cruelty dancing in his smile. "Arden Stone," he said smoothly. "I remember your name this time. Good job at the eliminations last time. I didn't think you'd be so smart." I pursed my lips, feeling a prick of annoyance. "Thank you," I replied quietly, forcing my gaze downward. If you're looking for extra credit, he continued, I have a few projects coming up, something a little more advanced, post-break perhaps. I think you'd be quite useful. I didn't respond. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Just come to my office anytime, Arden. We can raise your points higher with the project I have in my mind. Fortunately, working at the cafe provided a brief escape for my mind, even if it was just for a little while. However, by the time my shift began, my thoughts were an even bigger mess than before. I tied my apron, wiped down the counters, and smiled at the customers, but it felt as if I were dragging my feet to perform these small tasks. The afternoon dragged on. Dishes clanked in the background, Owen sang off-key in the kitchen, and at closing time, as I pushed the last chair onto the table, I noticed someone standing just outside the glass. Rowan. He waited silently until I stepped out, then fell into stride beside me like it was completely natural. You don't usually come here these days, I remarked, glancing up at him. I don't usually have anything to say. I raised an eyebrow but chose to remain silent. We passed beneath the dim yellow lights spilling from the cafe windows and wandered into the stretch of quiet leading toward the school gates. The silence hung heavily between us, awkward but not unbearable, until he abruptly stopped walking. I like you, he declared suddenly. So this was what he came here for? I turned to him slowly, letting out a deep breath. You don't like me, Rowan. His brows knitted together in confusion. I just told you I did. I shook my head firmly. No, you like that I don't bow to you like everyone else does. You like that I'm not scared of you. That's not true. It is, I said gently. You're not used to people treating you like an equal. That's why this feels so different to you. But you don't like me. His jaw ticked, a muscle twitching at my words. Who are you to say that? He shot back. I can see it, I muttered, glancing away. You don't look at me like that. The way he looks at Tessa. Rowan sighed and raked a hand through his hair. It's been a while since I poured out my feelings like this, and you're rejecting it, he grumbled, shaking his head in disbelief. Then, to punctuate his frustration, he pulled out a cigarette, lighting it while leaning against the cold surface of the concrete wall. I coughed when the smoke wafted into my nostrils. See? I hate this. I hate the smoke. You wouldn't be doing this if you actually liked me, I pressed, hoping he'd take pity on me. He didn't put it out. With crossed arms, I felt the cool night air wrap around my bare skin. You don't like me, I stated more firmly this time, challenging him to respond. I do, he insisted once more, a stubborn edge to his voice. But not like that, Rowan, I pressed, my heart beating a little faster. He looked up at the stars, an infinite stretch of darkness dotted by pinpricks of light. Why does it have to be so complicated, he muttered, sounding defeated. I smiled faintly. Because people are complicated, I replied softly. He didn't respond, his eyes still trained on the heavens above. I turned my attention back to him, seeing a man who didn't know how to be anything other than detached. Maybe he did like me in his own twisted way, but that wasn't the kind of love I sought. After a long moment of contemplation, I asked, Do you know where Cade is? Rowan stiffened at the mention of the name. The cigarette burned down slowly between his fingers, its ash accumulating like unspoken words. Then, to my shock, he smirked. So, he's the one you like, huh? I was taken aback, momentarily speechless. What? I stammered, trying to process his casual revelation. Cade, he said easily. Figured as much. Elias is going to be heartbroken, not to mention Jaxon, but that guy's an asshole anyway. I stared at him, bewildered. What are you talking about? He turned to me fully, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity I hadn't encountered before. For once, there was no teasing, no smugness, only an unsettling honesty. To answer your question, I don't know where he is. I let out a deep breath, feeling the cold air sting my lungs. What had I expected? He took another drag from his cigarette, and the smell made my nose crinkle, but I stayed silent. Then he spoke again, his tone shifting to one of subtle seriousness. But just know, out of the true alphas, Cade's the one I don't mess with. What do you mean? Rowan met my gaze. Because he's the one I respect the most. I can't even blame you, he added, letting out a dry laugh, the sound almost bittersweet, for liking that bastard. My lips parted in surprise, but I didn't know how to respond. Are you close with Cade? I finally managed to ask. Rowan scoffed, shaking his head in dismissal. Hell no, we're not close. We're not even friends. He exhaled smoke slowly through his nose. But I don't mind him. And that, somehow, meant more to me than if he had said yes outright. A small smile tugged at the corners of my lips. Despite being poised as rivals, there seemed to be no real hatred between them. Beneath the surface, it felt like they understood each other more than anyone else did. But then, Rowan's expression shifted. His voice took on a more somber tone. Cade's been through a lot, Arden. I looked at him, curiosity piqued. There are things you don't know, things that would break most people. And he's still here, standing, still fighting. That alone is admirable, he added. A tightness formed in my throat. You're in for a wild ride if you're planning to fight his demons with him, he said, his eyes steady on mine. I met his gaze and whispered, but I want to. He looked away. His cigarette trembled slightly in his fingers, then with a resigned sigh, he flicked it to the ground and crushed it halfway under his boot. I lost then, he murmured. I stared at him, stunned by the admission. I didn't think it'd annoy me this much, Rowan admitted, rubbing the back of his neck in a gesture of vulnerability. But I get it. Silence settled between us like a heavy fog. I turned toward him. Maybe you can also find someone close. His eyes met mine, and for a fleeting moment I swore he understood. Tessa. He didn't say her name, but his jaw tightened and his eyes darkened like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. He took a step toward me. Focus on yourself, Arden. I furrowed my brows. Don't meddle with me anymore, he added, his voice strained. I won't with the two of you. There was unmasked pain in his voice that he was trying hard to bury beneath a facade of indifference. He gave me one last look, heavy with unexpressed thoughts, then turned and vanished into the night. Have a good one. He called back, his voice distant, echoing as he walked away. Arden. The gymnasium was so loud it felt like the floor trembled with every cheer. It was the grand finale of the Academy Wars. Only 5 academies remained. The rest had been weeded out over the past few days. Now the final round had begun, the death match. The 5 schools sat on different podiums, each of us armed with a blank whiteboard and markers in hand. The rules were simple. Answer quickly and answer correctly. Get it wrong and you're out. No lifelines, no second chances. I glanced to my left. Elias had his brows furrowed, arms crossed as he awaited the next question. Across the room, representatives from the other schools fidgeted. The moderator stepped up to the mic. Next question. In pack dynamics, what is the most effective method to strengthen a bond between alphas and betas in high-pressure missions? Pens flew across the boards. I didn't even have to think. Shared vulnerability. I scribbled it across the board in clean, confident letters just as the buzzer rang. Correct. 3 teams were eliminated. Only 2 remained, ours and one from the Northern Crescent Academy. I knew I should have felt nervous, but all I could think about was that empty seat in the stands. Cade still wasn't here. For 3 whole days he hadn't shown up at school and hadn't contacted me either. Was I foolish for wishing to see him among those watching in the stands? Next question, the moderator continued. Solve the following. A supply convoy travels from point A to point B at a speed of 60 kilometers per hour. Midway, it stops for 20 minutes, then continues at a reduced speed of 40 kilometers per hour. What's the total travel time if the total distance is 180 kilometers? This wasn't an overly difficult question to answer. However, we only had 30 seconds on the timer, and that wasn't enough for some to even write out all the variables. I could hear the next team panicking, frantically writing at the same time. Elias, too, was scribbling on the provided scratch paper. Some students had pulled out calculators, while others simply waited for the answers. I studied the question closely and recognized that I wouldn't finish solving it on time if I wrote out everything. Half of 180 is 90. At 60 kilometers per hour, that's an hour and a half. Then a 20-minute stop. The next 90 kilometers at 40 kilometers per hour, 2 hours and 15 minutes. Add it all, 3 hours and 65 minutes. Wait, I corrected myself at the last possible second, 4 hours and 5 minutes. My hand trembled as I wrote it down. Elias turned to me with wide eyes. He was only halfway through, but the buzzer had already rang. I quickly raised the board high into the air. North Crescent couldn't finish it in time. Elite Order Academy takes the victory. The crowd erupted around us. Elias lifted his arms in triumph. Tessa and Owen screamed from the stands. The cheers thundered against the walls, echoing wildly. But I just stood there, my fingers tightened around the marker, and my heart wasn't in this. Cade still hadn't shown up. Even with all this, even with the win, I couldn't feel the pride I longed for. Not with Mr. Winters clapping slowly in the crowd, his eyes fixed on me like a hawk circling its prey. Not with this sick feeling in my gut that something larger was unfolding, something just out of reach. The ceremony blurred past in a whirlwind of flashing lights. School reporters swarmed us. A golden trophy was placed into our hands. Cameras clicked, students cheered. My name echoed from somewhere in the distance. We walked backstage while the other students celebrated in the front hall. My feet moved on instinct, the trophy cold and heavy in my grasp. As I stepped into the dim hallway, I felt someone gently grab my wrist. Arden. I turned to look at Elias. He looked serious, not smugly brilliant, as he usually did, just quiet and thoughtful. "You really are intelligent," he began. I couldn't even answer that last question with the time we had. I stared at him, unable to register his words. My thoughts were still consumed by Cade, but then something shifted. Elias's hand found mine. Before I could fully grasp what was happening, before I could react, I felt his lips against mine. My eyes widened and my breath caught in my throat, but even then, I felt nothing. Elias's lips were warm, soft even, but they didn't feel right. They didn't make my heart stutter. They didn't make my mind go silent the way Cade's presence did, even from a distance. I gently pulled back, placing my hand against Elias's chest. It wasn't a harsh movement, but it was firm. "What?" he asked, a crease forming between his brows. "Don't," I replied softly, striving to keep my voice steady. "Please don't do that again." He stared at me, stunned. "This is the first time I mustered the courage to do this," he muttered, "and you're pushing me away." I didn't want to hurt him. Elias wasn't a bad person. In fact, he had been kind to me on more than one occasion, but he wasn't the one for me. "Elias," I began, exhaling as I met his gaze. "Do you even like me?" I sensed he was in the same predicament as Rowan. He looked thrown off. "Of course I do. Why else would I?" "Really like me," I clarified. "Or do you like that I'm smart? That I would look good next to you, as the clever girl by your side? Because that is what's expected of you." His expression fell, a flash of guilt passing through his eyes. "I'm not a title," I said quietly, "and you shouldn't reduce yourself to just being a genius either." His mouth opened and then shut again. "You should wait for your mate, Elias," I continued, speaking softer now. "You're a smart person. I hope you find someone who can truly unfreeze your heart, someone who makes you want to take real risks, not just the ones that look good on paper." The silence between us grew taut. Elias looked away, his expression pained. I turned without waiting for a response. The lights backstage flickered as I stepped out into the hall, leaving the noise of celebration behind me. And then everything clicked. It was always Cade. Even when I hated him, I liked him. Even when he was distant, cruel, or haunted by someone else. Even with Honey. I didn't care. No, maybe that wasn't entirely true. I did care. It hurt, and it made me feel like I was walking toward a fire with no protection. But I wanted to walk toward him anyway, because this wasn't just about me. Whatever Cade was going through, he had no one but himself. I couldn't let that happen, not when I understood what it felt like to be alone in this place. Even if it broke me in the end, I had to help him. I broke into a run. The cold air kissed my skin as I pushed past the school gates and into the streets. I didn't even know if he'd be there. "Arden," I nearly collided with a tall figure who reached out to grab my arm. Jaxon, his hand curled around my wrist instinctively. "Where are you going?" "Let go of me," I said, breathless, trying to pull away. "Are you still mad at me for everything? Sienna's out of the picture now. Let go." His grip loosened, surprised by the steel in my voice. I didn't wait for him to respond. I broke free and continued running, the wind howling past my ears, drowning everything else out. I didn't stop until I reached the building where he lived. I was about to rush inside when I bumped into none other than Cade himself. My eyes widened. He looked disheveled, pale. There were dark circles under his eyes, but somehow he smiled. "Is it over?" he asked, his voice gentle. I nodded. "Yeah, we won." He looked disappointed. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I should have been there to see it." That was all it took. I broke. Tears spilled from my eyes before I could stop them, and my chest tightened with everything I had tried to hold back since he left. Cade's smile faltered. He stepped closer, brows furrowed in concern. "Arden, what's wrong? Who hurt you?" The worry in his voice undid me further. I looked up at him, my heart thudding in my ears. It didn't matter anymore. I had to say it. I had to say it before the fear swallowed me once again. I looked into his eyes and whispered, "I like you, Cade." Cade. I would always do everything for the people I loved. That was just who I was, no matter how much I tried to pretend otherwise. If they were in pain, I felt it acutely. If they cried, I could feel their anguish in my chest. It didn't matter whether they knew how deeply I felt, or even if they wanted me to carry that weight. The truth was, living this kind of life was exhausting. So many nights, I longed to disappear. I wanted to close the door on everything, to retreat into silence and solitude. But I couldn't. Because out there, someone always needed saving. And more than anyone, she did. I stared out the kitchen window, my knuckles tense as I leaned against the counter. My mother stood behind me, quietly drying a dish, while my dad sipped coffee at the table, both of them watching me like I was about to fall apart right in front of them. "You should go back," my dad finally said. "Don't miss school anymore." I turned away from the window. "How can I when she's like this?" A silence enveloped us. My mom sighed softly. "Just let it be, Cade." Her voice was gentle. "You have your own life to live. I'm sure she would want you to continue living yours without carrying the burden." But they didn't understand. They couldn't. Because it wasn't just anyone. "Something's happened to her," I said quietly. "I'm not giving up." My mother's voice rose gently, almost pleading. "Cade, you can't just keep caring about her like this. You'll ruin yourself." "How can I not?" I whispered, my gaze locking onto hers, "when she's the one who gave me this life?" Another silence engulfed the room. My dad sighed, this time louder, more frustrated. "Go back, Cade," he repeated firmly. "We didn't raise you to run away from your responsibilities. I honestly would have stayed a bit more if this was in the past. Yet a part of me longed to return to Elite." As I contemplated this, the source of my hesitation became clear. It was because of her. Arden. The woman I never intended to feel this way about. She had come out of nowhere, like a cold wind sweeping across a tranquil lake, silent, yet powerful enough to change the entire surface. I'd spent years living in my own head, holding back my true thoughts, trying to become what everyone else needed me to be. But then she arrived with her fire, intelligence, and a stubbornness that drove me absolutely insane. And suddenly, it felt like maybe I didn't want to be alone in this world any longer. "I'll be back the next day," I said, casting a glance back at them. "The break starts then." My mom sighed again, but this time she nodded, a glimmer of understanding shining in her eyes. "Take care, sweetie," she murmured, walking over to adjust my collar like she always did when I was younger. I let her. Then I left. The sun had already begun its descent behind the hills. My duffel bag bounced against my shoulder, and the path back to Elite felt longer than I remembered. Halfway through my journey, something struck me with sudden clarity. The Academy Wars. The finale. Arden had to be competing. She was brilliant. There was no way she got eliminated. She must have made it into the finals. Shit. I parked my car inside the building and quickened my pace. I broke into a jog. If I moved fast enough, if I arrived just on time, maybe I could witness her victory. I wanted to see her shine on that stage. I was near the gates when suddenly she crashed into me. Literally. She was running so fast she didn't even notice me until it was far too late, her shoulder colliding against my chest with enough force that it knocked the air from her lungs. Instinctively, I reached out, steadying her before she could stumble backward. My breath caught in my throat. She looked up at me, and in that moment, my world came to a standstill. She was out of breath, her cheeks flushed a vibrant pink, her eyes shimmering in the sunlight. Goddess, she looked utterly exhausted. Her hair was messier than usual, her sleeves wrinkled, and her bag hung partially unzipped, the contents threatening to spill out from her hasty run. And yet, she had never looked more beautiful. A wave of realization hit me all at once, crashing over me like a punch to the chest. It had been such a long time since I felt this way. But Arden, somehow she had become the light breaking through the darkness I'd been drowning in for so long. She blinked at me, her lips parted slightly, and then she said something that sent my heart racing even faster. "I like you, Cade." Just like that. I didn't even get the chance to process her words before she raised a hand between us. "Don't say anything just yet," she rushed, her eyes wide and her face flushed with embarrassment. "Please." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I simply smiled. Of course she'd say it like that. Direct, brave, stubborn. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, she continued, "You frustrate me. You're always so quiet when I want answers, always disappearing just when I think I finally understand you. You carry too much and say far too little. I never know what's going on in your mind. You're like a storm I can't read." I opened my mouth to respond, but she didn't allow me the chance. "And you must have someone already," she whispered. "There's always been someone in your heart, I can tell. Maybe that's why you act the way you do. Maybe that's why you don't let people get close." She bit her lip hard. "But even if you do," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, "even if you love Honey so much, I just wanted to say it. I'll be waiting. Not to get picked, not like that. Her gaze shifted away, her arms wrapping around herself in a protective manner. "I'll be waiting in case you need someone, even if it's not for what I want, even if you never feel the same." "Honey," I echoed, my brows furrowing in confusion. "How do you know about Honey?" Her gaze faltered, and she chewed anxiously on her lip again. For a fleeting moment, I was at a loss for words. She wasn't supposed to know about Honey yet. But maybe it didn't matter. Maybe this was simply how it was meant to come out. "I like you too, Arden," I said, my voice low but certain. She froze, her eyes locking onto mine, wide and unblinking. "What?" "I like you," I repeated, stepping closer, closing the distance between us. So much that I didn't even realize how far I'd fallen until I found myself searching for you in places where I knew you wouldn't be. Her breath hitched in her throat. "You make me want to stay," I admitted, my feelings pouring out. "You make this place feel less like a cage and more like something worth waking up for. I've been in the dark for so long, Arden, and you—" I shook my head, struggling to finish the thought. "You're the light," I whispered softly. Her expression crumbled. "But will Honey be all right?" she finally asked after a moment, her voice laden with concern. "She's important to you, right? If you're still together, I'll support you from afar, I promise. I'm just happy to get my feelings out of the way." A small, pained smile tugged at my lips as I reached out, taking her hand in mine. To my surprise, she didn't pull away. "Honey is important," I said. "And you are too. Both of you matter to me, Arden." She looked up at me, confusion flickering across her features. "I never wanted to keep secrets from you," I added earnestly. "But things are complicated. They always have been." A heavy silence fell between us. I could feel her gaze lingering on me, searching for the answer to the question hanging in the air. What now? So I asked gently, "Would you like to meet her?" "Arden." Cade didn't say much as he took my hand and began leading me away from the school grounds. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice a whisper, careful not to shatter whatever fragile space we occupied. "It's far," he murmured, "but I want you to meet her properly." Her. Honey, my heart thudded at the thought. I swallowed the sudden dryness in my throat and followed him in silence. He opened the passenger door of his car and waited until I climbed in. The interior smelled faintly of cedar and his scent, which comforted me instantly. He didn't speak at first as he started the engine. Instead, he reached over and gently pressed my head back against the headrest, his palm lingering there. "Rest," he said quietly. "We have a long drive." I turned to him and said honestly, "Cade, I don't think I can." His hand moved to tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear. "You can," he assured softly. "Just for a little bit. I'll wake you when we're there." How was I supposed to rest when I was being taken to see the person he loved? My heart raced, not because I was meeting someone else he clearly held dear, but because everything about Cade still felt like a puzzle I was desperate to solve. The car rolled down the highway, golden afternoon light slipping through the trees. My mind spun with questions, each one louder than the last. But then at a red light, something unexpected happened. Cade reached over, lifted my chin with 2 fingers, and kissed me. Just like that. The kiss didn't taste like goodbye. It tasted like a promise. When he pulled back, I searched his face with wide eyes. "Everything's going to be okay," he said, his voice calm, his thumb brushing gently against my cheek. And somehow I believed him. I exhaled slowly, and my body relaxed. The ache in my shoulders softened. My fingers, which had been anxiously fidgeting in my lap, fell still. I hadn't even realized how sleep-deprived I'd been these past few days, how heavy everything had begun to feel without him. Just like always, Cade's presence was the strange paradox I couldn't explain. He made my head swirl with questions, but he also made me feel safe. Sleep tugged at my lashes despite everything I told myself. He was still driving. He looked tired too, and I wanted to tell him to rest, to pull over and sleep for a while, but my mouth didn't manage to form the words. Before I knew it, everything faded to black. The brush of something warm on my forehead stirred me awake. A kiss. I blinked, my eyes adjusting to the soft late afternoon light. Cade stood by my door, already outside the car, holding it open. His expression was soft but not as gentle as his eyes. "Hey," he said, "we're here." I sat up slowly, my heart still tangled in sleep. "How long was I out?" "About 2 hours," he replied, offering his hand to help me up. I took it, bewildered by how steady and sweet he could be. Was this how he treated all the girls he liked? Was this how he treated Honey? The thought twisted something deep in my gut. I stepped out and inhaled deeply. We were surrounded by trees. The building behind him resembled a wide, beautiful facility, neither too modern nor too sterile. It looked like a countryside manor. There were people strolling around, quiet and calm. Some were accompanied by nurses, while others sat on benches beneath flowering trees. Everything felt peaceful. "Where are we?" I asked, my brows furrowing. Cade looked ahead, then back at me. "It's a treatment home," he explained. "Not exactly a hospital, more like a place for people who need time, to feel okay again." He paused, then nodded toward the path. "Come." And so I followed. Not because I wasn't scared, but because he asked. Because I wanted to know everything, even the parts he never spoke about. Even the parts of him that belonged to someone else. The place looked like it belonged in a painting. Trees swayed gently in the breeze, casting shadows across the cobblestone path. Everything was quiet, peaceful in a way that made your thoughts settle, like all the noise of the world had been put on pause. Cade led me forward until we reached the front doors, a soft chime echoing as we stepped inside. The scent of fresh linens and lavender welcomed us. It was pristine without feeling cold. "Cade?" a warm voice called out. An elderly nurse emerged from the hallway, wiping her hands on her apron. Her gray hair was tied in a low bun, and a softness lit up her expression as soon as she recognized him. "Cora," Cade greeted. "Oh my goodness," Cora gasped, stepping closer. "You were just here 3 days ago, weren't you? What brings you back so soon?" Cade offered her a sheepish smile. "I needed to see her again." "Well, she's fine now, sweetheart. Her condition has stabilized," the nurse said with a nod. "She's been talking non-stop about you." "Oh." Her eyes drifted toward me, and I straightened slightly, suddenly aware of how out of place I might seem. "And who's this pretty lady?" she asked, tilting her head slightly, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. I opened my mouth, unsure of what to say, but Cade answered first. "Someone special." Startled, I turned to him. He didn't meet my gaze, but his grip on my hand tightened just a bit. The nurse beamed and gave Cade's arm a small, encouraging pat. "Well, it's about time. I'm happy for you, Cade. You deserve someone to keep that heart of yours warm." A lump formed in my throat. There was something about this place, so strange, yet undeniably calming. The way the curtains fluttered in the hallway, the way soft piano music drifted faintly from somewhere down the corridor. It didn't feel like a hospital. It felt like bliss, isolated, yes, but not lonely. "Come," Cade said, gently tugging on my hand. I hesitated, my eyes drifting toward the nurse, who smiled and gave me a tiny wave before disappearing into another hallway. Cade looked at me again, softer this time. "Let's go see Honey." My heart caught at the mention of her name. Honey. He spoke her name with such familiarity and warmth that it made something ache deep within my chest. I frowned slightly, unsure if I should still be holding his hand, uncertain if it was appropriate to keep touching him like this in front of someone he clearly loved. But he didn't let go. He kept walking, and I followed. We stepped into a room that looked nothing like what I had imagined. It was bright and colorful, with soft white curtains that let sunlight pour in like melted gold. There were drawings on the walls, a vase of fresh lilies on the bedside table, and pillows adorned with mismatched, cheerful patterns. And standing at the window was a girl. No, not a girl. A woman, probably older than we were. She was beautiful. Delicate features, skin smooth with the color of mahogany, and wide eyes that sparkled with a kind of innocent joy. Her dark hair was braided down one side, and she wore a lilac cardigan over a simple dress. As soon as she saw Cade, her face lit up. "Cade!" she cried out. She dashed across the room with surprising energy, throwing her arms around him. He caught her easily, smiling as she kissed his cheek and held onto him tightly, giggling. I stood there, frozen, watching. I lowered my gaze, my hands clutching the strap of my bag as I took a slow breath. Then she peeked over Cade's shoulder and noticed me. Her expression changed immediately. She shrank back slightly, shyly, stepping behind him and hiding herself as a child might behind her older brother. Cade reached for her hand and gently tugged her forward. "She's fine, honey," he reassured her, using that same soft voice I had only heard when he spoke to me. "It's all right." He turned to me, his other hand still lightly brushing against hers. "Arden, this is Honey," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "My sister." Arden. Sister? Honey was Cade's sister? The word rang in my ears like a soft bell. For a moment I stood frozen, staring at the two of them. The way she hugged him, how she looked at him like he was a star in the sky, how she hid behind him, making him her shield and her warmth. Before Cade could explain further, the same nurse from earlier popped her head through the open door. "Cade, dear?" she called out kindly. "Could you help get the ball out of the maple again? I swear the wind here has a personal vendetta against our afternoon games." Cade turned to her, already smiling, a smile that was soft and boyish, one that made my heart stutter all over again. "I'll be right back," he told me, gently releasing Honey's hand. "Wait," I tried, but the words slipped out too late. He was already out the door, leaving me alone in the room with the sister I had mistaken for someone else entirely. Honey watched me with wide, uncertain eyes, her fingers wringing the edge of her cardigan. I shifted my weight awkwardly, unsure of how to approach. "Honey," I asked gently, keeping my tone low and non-threatening. She didn't respond. Her shoulders curled inward, and she took a timid step back, disappearing behind the curtain that swayed gently by the window. My chest clenched. I raised my hand slowly, open-palmed. "It's okay," I said softly. "I won't hurt you, I promise." Her eyes darted to my hand, suspicious yet curious. Then I tried something different, something simpler. "Pinky promise?" I asked with a tiny smile. Honey tilted her head. Then she slowly stepped out from behind the curtain, a spark of recognition lighting her face. She lifted her pinky, small and delicate, and held it toward me. We linked fingers. She gasped. "Power," she whispered. "Very powerful." "Huh?" I tilted my head, confused. But before I could ask what she meant, she stepped closer and looked up at me, serious now. "You won't hurt me?" "I won't," I promised quietly. She reached out and touched the tip of her finger to my chest. "You won't hurt Cade?" My breath hitched. "Never," I whispered. She stared at me for a long moment, and then she smiled. A real, bright, childlike smile that melted every bit of tension in the room. "Then Honey likes you," she declared cheerfully, referring to herself in the third person. I couldn't help the small smile that appeared on my lips. "Arden likes you too," I said, mirroring her words. "Arden," she repeated, trying the name out. "Arden, you need to play well with Cade." That caught me off guard. "Play well?" "He gets sad when he has no one," she said. "When he's sad, he hides it, but Honey knows." Something clenched in my chest. "I will," I said. "Don't worry." The guilt hit me hard. I had been jealous, of her, of Cade, disappointed even, but how could I have known? How could I have imagined this truth? And yet, something deeper twisted in my gut. Had I been too detached, too consumed by my own struggles to notice his? I didn't know. All I knew was that I had judged someone I didn't even know. I had judged Cade too, maybe a little harshly. But here I sat, in the warmest room I'd ever been in, holding hands with his sister. Then Honey pulled out a pair of dolls from a little basket near her bed and handed me one. "Let's play," she said, beaming. I laughed softly. Okay. We played. She gave each doll a name. One was Captain Pickle, and the other was a princess with a crown made from a cut-up paper cup. Honey narrated an entire fantasy world where flowers talked and clouds threw parties, and I followed along, laughing more than I had in days. For a while, the room didn't feel like a facility anymore. It just felt like joy. I was in the middle of rescuing a plush squirrel when I heard footsteps. The door creaked open, and Cade stepped in with the sun behind him, his face glowing with warmth. He paused when he saw us. "She trusts you already," he said, a note of disbelief and pride in his voice. Honey looked up and giggled. "Arden pretty." My cheeks flushed. Cade glanced at me, then grinned. "Arden is very pretty, right?" Honey nodded enthusiastically and hugged my arm. "Very, very." Dinner was quiet and peaceful. Cade and I sat on one side of a wide window, the golden light of dusk spilling across the table like melted honey. The nurses had taken Honey out to the garden to feed the koi, their cheerful chatter trailing down the hallway. It was just us now. Still, I couldn't bring myself to touch the brownies, our dessert, sitting in front of me. Cade noticed. He leaned back in his chair, his hands loosely clasped in his lap. "I'm sure you have a lot of questions," he said. There was silence between us before I finally blurted, "I'm sorry." His eyes widened slightly, but there was no anger, only concern. "You don't have to say sorry," he replied. "You must have felt bad about being left in the dark." "No," I responded quickly. "That's not it. I mean, maybe a little, but not like that. Cade, I misjudged everything. I thought you were hiding some tragic love story, or that you still had feelings for someone who wasn't me. I got jealous, and I thought—" I cut myself off with a breath, realizing I was rambling. My hands were shaking slightly, so I pressed them into my lap. Cade didn't interrupt. He simply stood up from his chair and came to kneel in front of mine. I looked down at him, confused, my breath shallow. Then his hands were on either side of my face. Before I could stop the rush of thoughts trying to pour out of me again, he kissed me. This time it wasn't soft or questioning. It was steady. When he pulled back, he didn't let me go. His forehead rested lightly against mine, and his voice came low and sure. "You and Honey," he said, "are both important to me, in very different ways." I swallowed. My hands moved without thought, finding his wrists and holding on tightly. He continued, "Honey is my sister. I love her more than I can ever explain. She's been through more than most people can survive. I've spent most of my life trying to protect her, trying to keep her safe in a world that doesn't know how to be kind." I nodded softly, my heart squeezing in my chest. He took a breath. "And then you came along." His voice cracked a little, and it made my throat ache. "You brought something back into my life that I didn't think I'd ever feel again, Arden. Light, not just sunshine and smiles, but warmth. You don't fix me. You don't need to. But you make the dark quieter." Tears blurred my eyes. "I like you," he said, "because you remind me what it feels like to truly live." I opened my mouth to speak, but he beat me to it. "And because of that," he murmured, "I'm ready to tell you everything." He pulled back just slightly to meet my eyes. Everything. I saw the hesitation there, a guarded kind of hope. "Just," he said, "I hope you won't hate me after this one." A tear slipped down my cheek. "I could never hate you," I whispered, my voice cracking. My hands slid up to cradle his face, my thumbs brushing the sharp lines of his jaw. "I could never hate you," I repeated softly, as my lips met his once more. "Arden." It was silent for a while. There weren't any lingering people in the garden, and the lights began to flicker off one by one, casting the space into deeper shadows. Finally, he looked up at the moon and said quietly, "I'm different from my family. I think you can tell." I nodded, my eyes searching his profile, illuminated by the pale blue cast of the night. Cade sighed, then added, "I think you could have guessed it from our features and skin color. I look like I'm not related to her." He paused, and I took that as my cue to lean a little closer. "That's because they aren't my real family," he confessed. My breath hitched, but I remained silent, allowing him the space to speak. "I was born far north of here, in a place I don't even want to remember the name of," he continued. "I was 5 when I witnessed my dad kill my mom right in front of me. We were starving, and he decided that dying together was the best way to escape our life. He tried to kill me too." A sharp sting prickled behind my eyes, but I refrained from speaking. I wanted him to continue because I knew how difficult it was for him to share this. I ran. I had no idea where to go. I was barefoot, with the blood of my mother staining my shirt, and I just kept running. He let out a dry laugh. And then there she was, Honey. She was only 13 at that time, and it seemed she had wandered far from her own home. When she saw me, she didn't hesitate. She grabbed me, hid me, and cleaned me up herself. She made me eat the snacks she had in her pocket and wrapped me up to keep me warm. My stepmom, the Luna, had become barren after having Honey through a complicated pregnancy. They longed for a son, so they took me in with open arms, he explained. Cade looked down, his voice softening. I owe her my life, truly. I could picture it now, little Cade, hollow-eyed and frightened, and Honey, bold and bright, wrapping an arm around him, shielding him with everything she had. She became my best friend, my real family. We shared everything, and I considered her my true sister. My heart ached at the thought. She's 8 years older than me, but never once did she make me feel like I didn't belong. She always said, Cade, you're my little moon. I'll never let the night swallow you. He swallowed hard. Among everything, she loved our pack. She was born for it, destined to become the true Luna of the North. I turned to face him more fully. She met her mate? He nodded, pain flashing in his eyes. Yeah, when she was 16. He was the same age, and they were perfect together. He used to say that Honey made him believe in the stars again. A breeze rustled through the trees, carrying with it unspoken memories. Cade's voice dropped to an almost whisper. But then she came to Elite. Something changed. She stopped calling as often. I tried to reach out to her, but she always said things were fine. Still, I could tell something was off. What happened? I asked softly, drawing closer in curiosity and concern. She never told us, only that her mate had gotten sick, and then one day the school called. He had died. They claimed it was an illness. Just like that? Yeah. Cade clenched his jaw. Honey, after that, she was never the same. She stopped smiling. Sometimes she just stared at the walls, appearing to be searching for something she had lost within them. He rubbed the back of his neck, his voice unsteady. Then one day, she just stopped speaking, just like that. Her body functioned perfectly. She could walk, eat, sleep, but she didn't say a word. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. We went to every doctor we could find, healers, mind linkers, even shamans. No one could offer an explanation. They just said she had regressed. His mouth pursed bitterly around the word. The school promised they'd help. Headmaster Winters even cried when he saw her again, claiming she didn't deserve this, that she had become like this for nothing. Did Honey tell you what happened? I whispered, my heart aching for both him and her. Cade shook his head slowly. Not once. Whatever happened, it's locked up tight in her mind, and I couldn't break in if I tried. I've just been waiting and hoping. With every word Cade spoke, my heart tightened. He didn't deserve any of this. No one should have to endure such pain at such a young age. The reason I left suddenly a few days ago was because of her. She's better now, but she still has her episodes. She had a particularly tough one that day, and Cora called me because she thought a familiar face might help. And it did, I murmured, realizing how deeply Honey must love Cade. He met my gaze, his eyes reflecting quiet gratitude. Yeah, that's why I'm so amazed by how she treats you when you've just met. Honey took a long time to adjust to this place, but you earned her trust the moment you came into her life. You must have a really good heart, he added softly. He looked like he wanted to say more, but I didn't give him the chance. Instead, I moved in without thinking, wrapping my arms around him tightly, pressing my cheek to his shoulder. I'm so sorry, Cade. He hesitated for just a moment before holding me back, just as tightly. She's part of me, he whispered, just like the life she lost, just like you. Cade bore a heavy load of grief, and I wanted to be someone who helped him carry that weight, not someone he had to shield from it. I clung to him like he was the last thread keeping me grounded in a world that felt overwhelming. I wasn't sure how long I stayed like that, but with each second, I felt his pain resonate beneath his strong heartbeat. It must have been incredibly tough for you, I whispered, my voice breaking. Cade didn't respond, but I felt him exhale, slow and deep. His arms tightened around me. One hand pressed gently against the small of my back while the other cradled the back of my head. That simple action unleashed my tears. They spilled freely down my cheeks, and I wasn't even sure when they had started. I tried to wipe them away quickly, but it was no use. "Why are you the one crying?" He chuckled softly, a gentle smile tugging at his lips. "You're beautiful regardless, but you're even prettier when you smile." I sobbed harder, pushing against his chest just long enough to look up at him, tears still cascading down my face. "Cade," I whimpered, brushing a strand of hair away from his face. My fingers glided through his hair, tangling lightly in the soft strands, and I cupped his cheek with a trembling hand. "Little Cade must have had a rough time," I whispered. "You did, didn't you?" He didn't answer, but the softness in his eyes spoke volumes. There was so much grief hidden within them. He had learned to live with it, but that didn't mean it didn't ache. I leaned forward, resting my forehead against his, my fingers still stroking his cheek. "You deserve everything good," I told him sincerely. "You're not alone." His hand tightened around me gently, not possessively. I closed my eyes, savoring the moment. The night air outside was cool, but in this space, this quiet little room, everything felt warm and safe. For a long time, I murmured, I felt like I didn't belong in my family, like I was trying to fit into a mold that was never made for me. He opened his eyes at that, curiosity sparking within them. "I'm not perfect," I continued. "We're not perfect, but that's okay." Cade nodded slowly, resting his chin against the top of my head. "I'll take care of you, Arden," he said earnestly. "No matter what happens, I'll protect you." My heart clenched at the promise in his words. It felt like a vow whispered beneath a blanket of stars. "Me too," I whispered back. "I'll take care of you and Honey, both of you."